Good evening, everyone.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our 2024 State of the Market. We've been putting the final touches on the slides like up until today to make sure they're just like super timely. Very excited about our predictions for the coming year. And we were just reflecting that we have a baby coming next month. So we feel like we have our plans like through the end of the year, like down to the week. Like this is happening in this week and this is happening and in our personal lives and the business with some acquisitions that we have coming up. And yet when we talk to folks, a lot of people, I would say most people, not only don't have that level of certainty, but they feel kind of quite the opposite. I would say now more than ever, people are just like unsure of like, well, what's going on with the jobs data and interest rates and how are these two things related and what's happening with government spending and is it still possible to do single family homes and is there money to be made in multifamily real estate? Just all more questions, I would say, over the last, I don't know, 3 to 6 months than before. And so we're excited to do our state of the market and hopefully transfer to you some of the certainty that we have as we're entering into Q4 2024 and then looking ahead for what we have coming up for 2025. We are big believers that clarity is power and that kind of that human tendency to get stuck in indecision can rob people of years of growth, of economic growth, wealth growth, working toward that generational wealth, passive income, all of those things. But most importantly, it doesn't just rob you of the growth that happens now. It's a stacking effect, right? So it robs people of the growth that they have in the last year of their productivity, right? So if you are going to have some sort of leap in your growth this year, that puts you on a trajectory so that say 10 or 20 or 30 years from now, you're at a different end point than if you delayed growth this year or 2 years or whatever it is. And so excited to transfer some of that clarity and certainty to all of you. Excited to be here together tonight. Welcome, everyone. Love seeing the introductions in chat. As always, put your questions and comments in the chat. We try our best to weave that into the presentation and make this as interactive as possible.
Let's dive in.
You ready? All right. Let's get our slides going.
We have such great slides. You can listen in podcast format if you want, and kind of pop in to see different charts and graphs and tables and stuff like that. But we definitely have a very visual presentation for you this evening.
Yeah, and if you have some questions about kind of what's happening in the economy or, you're thinking about plans for the upcoming quarter, the upcoming year, and you have that already, feel free to pop that in the chat. That'll help us to guide our presentation time. We have 43 slides. Shall we jump in?
Yep, we cut it down. We had 55 slides at our last State of the Market. Elaine and Rachel wanted to keep this tighter, so I was very disciplined. We cut quite a few slides.
Everyone gets a good night's sleep tonight.
That's right.
With certainty and clarity and power. All right. Our usual disclaimer, the information we're presenting tonight, you can consider it for informational purposes, educational purposes. This is not a solicitation to sell securities. We don't give investment advice. Before making any investment decision, you should review all of the documents, the private placement memorandum, the operating agreement, speak with your attorney, CPAs, financial advisors. We make forward-looking statements about our predictions. Those are exactly that. They're predictions based off of past behavior, but no guarantee that those predictions do indeed come true in the future. And then anytime we're specifically talking about future financial predictions or forecasts for, say, the Black Swan portfolio, just keep in mind that past performance is not a guarantee of future outcomes. Though we do try our best to really make sure our predictions, like we're really, I think during our like lives, we're very like animated and we talk and all that, but behind the scenes, we're very like disciplined with our spreadsheets. And we're very analytical and all of those sorts of things. So we try to make sure our predictions are in line with our past performance and really where we see the puck is going.
A little bit about us, if you've not met us before, not heard of us before. We are a real estate private equity firm. We've got over a third of $1 billion in assets under management. I think we're maybe up to 375 million in assets under management, something like that. Raised over 70 million in capital. We've had over 180 million dollars of real estate sales. We've got a pretty good real estate sales team. It's not something we talk about a lot in these webinars here, but it's a big part of what we do. And we've done a little bit of ground up construction, over $50 million of ground up construction. So that's not to brag, just to share just a few kind of bullet points why we've been doing this for a while. We're pretty good at this, and you might want to listen to some of our thoughts on what the state of the market is. We've never had a capital call. We've never lost money on a real estate deal. You might ask yourself, at a time when, in our industry, that's kind of a rare thing, how have we managed to achieve that? Probably in the top, maybe 5% of outcomes for people in our industry right now. We got a ton of fixed rate debt, a ton of full recourse debt. During the pandemic, more than 90% of multifamily real estate deals closed with variable rate debt. And if you were attending our webinars back then, we were kind of on a soapbox about how lowest interest rates in history, probably not a great time to get variable rate debt. And unfortunately, those chickens, they came home to roost exactly as we thought they might. So we have a lot of really low fixed rate long-term debt. So we have no rate caps on variable rate loans. We have huge amounts of liquid reserves. And we're vertically integrated, kind of playing in temperate blue ocean markets. So we don't own things in the Sun Belt where there's a lot of kind of boom and bust. We're very boring Midwesterners in very boring Midwestern markets that are doing quite well through the pandemic, which you'll see a lot about in this presentation. So, to a certain extent, that's almost like the mic drop right there these days, is just that we've been able to put together a very sizable portfolio, serve a lot of investors, create a lot of wealth for a lot of investors without ever having a capital call or losing money on a real estate deal. So that's a little bit about our track record.
And the crazy thing is, us, the fixed rate debt people, you'll see at the end of our slides, I think it's like our next to the last slide. Yeah. Like we're going to talk a little bit about variable rate debt. And
now is the time for variable rate debt.
Now is the time, right? Yep. So while everyone's spooked about variable rate debt, right? Because they've touched that hot stove, the stove is off right now. So it's okay to touch. So I'm excited to get to that.
And we're sort of getting a $20 million variable rate loan right now. So that's some good sizzle.
There we go.
To lead
I think it's like slide 42.
Yeah.
So hang in there with me, guys.
And by the way, if you would like to invest with us, you can go to blackswanfund4.com. We've got some amazing assets in that fund already, and that fund is more than half full. So we're really excited to fill the rest of that fund and serve anyone here. You'll see that the things that we're doing in Fund 4 align very well with where we predicted the market would be this year, and where we see the market going here in the coming year. So we practice what we preach.
Yeah. We had a bit of a kind of Nick and I like to use the word epiphany, but you can't use that word too often because it wears it out. So we use the word epiphanet.
Small epiphany.
Yeah, small epiphany. That's when we know, like, that's our cue to each other of like, hey, really listen to what I'm about to say. This is important to me. We had a bit of an epiphanet. I think it was just like a few days ago that we are acquiring more real estate in 2024 than any year in the company history before. And it's really because all of the market conditions are right. And it doesn't mean it's easy. It's way harder than 2020, 2021, 2022.
Very hard to get a deal together right now.
But there's just so much opportunity out there. If you can have that clarity and that certainty and that long range vision and the operations and kind of all of those pieces. So very excited about Fund 4 and excited to bring along investors if you'd like to join us in Fund 4.
We think 2024 will be the best year to buy real estate since, like 2010. And the people who
we got started in 2011. We were still dating in 2010, so we weren't going to buy real estate together. We got married in 2011 and immediately started buying real estate together.
And the people that did well, the people that survived and thrived through this winter, this time of economic winter in our industry, those are the people who are going to do extraordinarily successful in 2026, 2027. Those are going to be some of the most bumper crop years for our industry. So we're amassing a huge portfolio to lean into that. So what are we here to do today? We're going to talk about where the U.S. economy is at. We're talking about the Chinese economy for a slide. Elaine's always complaining that I'm talking about the Chinese economy, but it's a big deal. Talk about where the single-family, multifamily real estate market is at. But we don't want to just throw a bunch of charts and graphs at you. We want to make sure you understand where we are, where we're going, and ultimately what you need to do to survive and thrive in this season, in this economic cycle. But before we do that, I know y'all are on the edge of your seats to see how we did last year. So well, let's just start with that here.
So this is, I believe, verbatim cut and pasted from our 2023.
This is cut and pasted.
Yeah.
We have not modified any predictions to make sure.
Yeah, from our December 2023 State of the Market, which is available on YouTube.
Yeah, we're gonna run our own scorecard here, but you keep us honest. Throw it in chat if you disagree with how things turned out. So, we said that 2024 was going to be a winter that was scary at times, but not bad overall. I think that's pretty darn accurate. There's a lot of doom and gloom, but the Fed talks about like a soft landing. I think that's largely been achieved. We have predicted that Treasury rates would decline, which when we made this prediction, Treasury rates were actually increasing. So it seemed a little crazy, but Treasury rates have come down quite a bit. We've got a chart later on that later in the presentation on that. We predicted that unemployment would rise slightly, but not by much, which again, when we made that prediction, that's when unemployment rates were starting to tick up and people were saying there's going to be a rampant unemployment.
That the soft landing would never happen.
Exactly. Yep. 7% unemployment or something like that. We predicted that wages would rise, which sounds just a little bit, kind of out of step with the notion that unemployment would be rising while wages are rising. That sounds crazy that those two things would happen together, but you'll see very soon why that's the case and why both of those things did indeed turn out to be true. We talked about how the US dollar would remain strong and the currency of the world. So like one of the first questions we got at our event last year, our in-person event, was, what do you guys think about de-dollarization? And unfortunately, there's a lot of groups out there that do state of the market webinars, and they have something to sell you. So maybe they're selling gold or silver, and they'll give you all the reasons why the sky is falling and the economy is going to crash and the dollar will lose its status as the world's reserve currency. And we have no belief that that's going to happen. Even though that's something that theoretically could be good for us in the real estate industry, there's no reason to believe that's going to happen. We predicted that inflation would continue to improve, but we'd never get back to like the good old days. And it seems like that's almost exactly where CPI fell in here. We predicted that American reshoring would pick up steam, which was kind of a bold prediction given, just how much had happened, how rapidly. But we've seen that growth has even picked up further, and we've got a slide on that later on here. We predicted a GDP growth. Now, again, back when we made this prediction, that was not looking to be the case in the coming year, but that did indeed turn out to be the case. This was kind of a squishy one here. We begin to feel AI, and it's very good for the USA. So I have a confession to make. I got an email earlier this week or late last week that was the best spam email I've ever gotten. It appeared to come from one of our credit card providers. And I called the credit card company. I met with our accountant. I'm like, this looks like a legit email, and it says that it's like my social security number has been changed. I'm a tech guy. Like I wrote software to find these scams and that sort of thing. And the guy on the phone with the credit card company said, nope, we've not sent anything out. Sir, are you sure you're not seeing like a spam email? It took me a good half hour going through that whole thing before I finally came to the conclusion that it was indeed a spoofed email. To this day, I don't even know technologically how they did it. It was the highest quality scam email I have ever received.
And it came from Chase, just in case any of y'all get something very similar. It was like 3 in a row of like, your address has changed, your phone number has changed, your social security number has changed. It was in like 2 or 3 minutes of each other. They all looked super legit. Of course, when you get an email like that, never call the number in the email or click on anything in the email, call the number on the back of your credit card. But usually those things are like hopelessly obvious, like a word is misspelled or like the alignment's all off or something. These were really good.
So that's AI right there. It's AI that has the ability to draft these extremely, extremely believable phishing emails. Now, the second part of that statement is it's very good for the USA. I think that the USA is by far the #1 unquestioned leader in AI right now, and so I think it is a good thing for the USA. I've sadly felt AI here just in the last 7 days in a way I've never felt it before. USA does absolutely amazing compared to the rest of the world. I'm a very unapologetic patriot. I hate that there's like a political overtone to that or whatever. Like we are all just so unbelievably lucky to just be here, right? We have an au pair that we're hiring coming from South Africa, and she is just like she's literally crying that she gets the privilege to come to the United States. Like things are so good here, just so unbelievably good. Like all we have to do to succeed is just not mess up that insane advantage that just we won the lottery just by being here. And the USA is continuing to just outperform every other country on earth right now in the current set of economic situation, circumstances, challenges everyone's dealing with.
Nick for president.
Yeah, no.
I am like way too selfish of your time to let you be the president.
Sounds horrible.
I would never allow that.
Next, we find out things are far worse in China than expected. We've got a couple slides on that. Things are pretty bad in China. And continuing geopolitical instability, which is a tough situation. That remains one of the trump cards here. So we've got our 20. So I think we were batting 100% on. Maybe we only got half of the AI thing. That was a squishy one there. I don't know. So I think we're batting 100% there. Let me know if you disagree. For single family homes, we predicted a boring but mild winter for everyone but home builders. So remember, at this time, this is when interest rates were skyrocketing and home sales volumes were way down. A lot of people were talking about like a crash in single family home values because sales were slowing down. And we said, no, this is, there's not enough supply. So there's no way that a crash can really happen here. We predicted that mortgage rates would start to come down, though not enough to unlock pent-up demand. I think that's exactly kind of where things have landed. We've got a chart on that a little bit later. Sales volume remains low, but not catastrophic. So sales volume is down 25% year over year, which I think articulate as low, but not catastrophic. Inventory remains low. Nationally, we're still under 2 months of inventory, so it's low, but it's up a little bit. So I think we were spot on there. Premium and new home prices declined. That happened, but starter home prices were stable or even increased. That happened. Regional variation, the Sun Belt struggles, the Midwest does well. We've got a really cool graphic on that later. That is exactly what happened. New home starts and deliveries slow down. That is exactly what happened. In fact, we had the slowest month for housing starts last month since the start of the pandemic, which is very bad for the U.S. Rents increase as people who would ordinarily buy have to rent. Single family homes saw solid rent growth, not amazing, but solid. And many agents and investors exit, and that also did happen. So I think we're batting 100% on our single family predictions.
The thing about economic cycles, we're going to share our economic clock on a couple of slides. Like, I would encourage you guys to like memorize that economic clock. Once you see these patterns, right, they're not 100% accurate in terms of predicting them, but what's the saying? Like the future isn't.
It doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme.
Yeah, it doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. So you can look at this for what happened in the single family home market in 2024 and have some pretty good idea of what's going to happen in the single family home market in, say, the period like 2027 to 2030. Mm-hmm. Because inventory is still low. There's so many buyers that are still trying to break into home ownership, that are still trying to upsize their homes or even sell their homes and downsize, but there's just not enough of those kind of like mid-range homes available. If home builders took a big step back in 2024, because as interest rates went up, they didn't want to be caught holding the bag on their inventory, right? 2008 is not that far back in the psyche of home builders. So they pulled back the reins way faster than they would have in, say, maybe 2006 or 2007. Well, then that means there's going to be even less supply in the coming years, despite the fact that there's still families that need homes. There's still increasing population in the United States. So you can see these patterns of how the single family home market will likely behave in the coming years. And even though there's a lot of challenges in the single family home market right now in terms of low inventory and high interest rates, you can have some idea that the value of single family housing is very, very likely to continue to have a steady upward trajectory over the next many, many years, simply because of economics 101 of supply and demand. Mm-hmm. And that all of this made it even worse than 2023 and before. What about multifamily? Oof. Very different. And I would say what I saw, we started investing in 2011, and single family and multifamily kind of trended together. Mm-hmm. And it was really in 2022 when single family and multifamily really became like almost kind of different asset classes.
100%.
Like in our minds, we had kind of always lumped them together as long-term residential real estate is what we called it. But because the debt is so different, the typical debt on a single family home is a 30-year fixed rate mortgage, whether that's an owner occupant or an investor, whereas the typical debt on multifamily, particularly through the pandemic, was very short term, let's say like 2 to 4 years, and variable rate, their behavior split drastically in the last year or so. And I think that's going to continue over the next several years because of the changes in debt.
100%. And discrepancies in supply. Those used to move in tandem together, and now single family and multifamily supply have become totally disconnected. That's a great observation that they're almost different asset classes at this point. Yeah. So very different picture for multifamily. A freezing, brutal winter. Things are 10 times worse in 2024 than they are in 2023. The tide goes out. We find out who has been swimming naked, as Warren Buffett would say. I was at Limitless last week with our team, and it was frankly brutal just talking to different GPs and LPs in the industry. Everyone is losing money. It's very, very low sentiment. When we'd say, yeah, we've got a third of $1 billion assets under management. We've never had a capital call. Like, just there, like the conversation would skip a beat. Like, well, how the hell did you do that? Like, I'm in 15 syndications and all of them have had capital calls. How are you guys not losing money? It's been a very difficult year for multifamily real estate. Improving interest rate environment saves some failing operators, but not nearly enough. Lots of capital calls, but LPs are running out of cash. Sales volume increases manyfold. Growing inventory, but it's difficult to put deals together. All these things have come to be true. Price discovery occurs. That did indeed happen. Prices have gone down, probably 20-25% from peak. So the prices did indeed decline significantly. Lots of regional variation. Sunbelt struggles, Midwest not so much. We've got some charts on that here a little bit later. More new units delivered than in 40 years, a huge amount of new supply, and rents decline in those areas and are flat elsewhere. We've got some charts on that. That is exactly what's occurred. Institutional players get back in the game. So you maybe have seen some headlines that like Blackstone just bought, $10 billion of real estate. They picked up a place in our neck of the woods here recently. The institutional players are back, and they are not dummies. There's a reason why they're buying. 2024, I think, is the best year to buy multifamily, that we're going to see in quite some time. Many brokers, syndicators, and investors exit. Unfortunately, that has definitely happened. Banks try to work things out. Debt funds eat their customers. So you've heard us on a soapbox about, doing business with like these Wall Street kind of loan shark debt fund players. And things got so bad. If you buy an apartment building at 80% LTV and it loses 30% of its value, now even the lender is upside down. So those sharks, there's no value in them consuming their prey. Now, as those values start to recover a little bit, those players are ahead, and they're starting to go after their customers here. The only saving grace would be a sudden and steep decline in interest rates or other bailout type program, which absolutely could happen. So that has not come to be. The Fed did issue guidance to regional banks saying, like, work things out. Do not foreclose no matter what. We're going to put all these measures kind of quietly into place where the banks don't go into default, or they don't have a troubled asset portfolio or anything like that. So not exactly like a bailout program, but the government has taken quiet but massive action to make sure that there's not a wave of foreclosures, but no huge downturn event or government bailout program. So I don't know. I would say we were, did we actually predict that would happen? I said only if that happens, that's the only thing things would get better. So I don't know. I don't think we said that would happen. We said that could happen. So I think we're probably batting 100% on our 2024 multifamily predictions. So what do y'all think about that? That was like 30 predictions we just went through. I think we got them 100% correct. Does anyone disagree with anything here, or what are your thoughts on that?
While you guys are participating in the chat, we'll talk about seasons. If you've been around us before, you've heard this. I encourage you to listen again, right? Like, this is such a timeless lesson. Nick and I talk about this, gosh, probably at least every day. Like, something comes up in our personal lives, the growth of our children, our business, our portfolio, and we're always like, okay, well, stop. Like, what season is this question or this problem representing, and what should we be doing in that season, and what should we be doing in the next season? We have this lovely piece of art that visually represents that, so that we can see that growth. We feel it very viscerally.
Where is that art right now?
It's in the office across the hall.
I had it behind us, I think, for our seasons talk, for our state of the market last year, but I forgot to grab it for this talk.
Yeah. We feel it so viscerally because we live in Minnesota, and we actually drive past, I don't know, a mile or two of cornfields every day on our commute into the city. We live like just far enough out of Rochester that we're driving past cornfields. And so we see this every day. And it's such a powerful paradigm to think about the world. And it's very, very obvious, right? Like a lot of the ways to think about the economy or investing or those sorts of things can sometimes feel so heavy and so complex and can get us into that decision paralysis. But thinking about the seasons is so intuitive because you've lived it your entire human life. Spring is a time for planting, planning, beginning. Everything's new. Like as soon as I like see this slide, I immediately start to hear birds chirping. I immediately feel the feeling of like the windows are open and you're like drying laundry like out in the sun, like spring cleaning, getting the dust off, lots of growth, speed, volume. Summer is you're working your heart out. If you think about summer as like the season of the farmer, right? Like they're up at dawn, they're out till late, they're out on the tractor, they're sweating, they're perhaps worried, they're working their tails off and they're hoping like, man, I hope that my work produces yield. I hope that the crop, comes to bear so that I can create the wealth that I'm trying to create with my crop this year. And it seems like things are going slow in summer. Like Nick and I are very much in the summer season of raising our family, for example. And it's like, how many times do I have to pick up laundry off of the floor? How many times do I
wish it was just laundry and not poop or pee or
how many
whatever
times do I have to say,
food.
children, the hamper is right next to the toilet. If you just take your clothes off and then you just like extend your arm and drop it, like I purposely put the hamper right there.
They're gonna get it. They're gonna get it. Like there will be a harvest.
Can you guys feel the summer there of like, where is my crop? Why am I working so hard for this? Like, what's going on? That's the summer season. Fall is a time of harvest, abundance. Everything feels good. If summer was a success, there's fall festivals, there's apple orchards, pumpkins, all of the things. If you planted in spring, and you worked your heart out in summer, you love fall because you don't have to get up at dawn. You're not on the tractor all day. The weather's a little better, and you know that you had success. Conversely, if you didn't plant in spring or you didn't work in summer or there was something catastrophic in summer, fall is very scary. You feel the shortening of the days. You feel that that there's no more opportunity to go out and plant more seeds, and you wonder, will I have enough to get through winter?
You see other people's harvests and think, man, should I plant right now and try to reproduce the thing that they have, which is the worst time you could possibly plant. So harvest can be a bipolar time depending on how your spring and summer work.
And then winter always follows fall. It doesn't last forever. Some are long, some are short, some are hard, some are easy. Winter can be a time of joy, right? If you went into the fall season feeling victorious and plentiful and abundant, you carry that through the winter. You think about, how can I make the next spring even better? What are the things that went well? What are the things that I need to do differently? And it's the best time to grow. It's the best time to plan and to prepare for spring. And then conversely, if fall was tough, winter gets even tougher, right? Think about like animals out in the wild, like looking for, what little sustenance is left, like trying to get through the winter. It's a tough period. And it's designed in the nature of the seasons to call out the weak and to constantly be forcing us toward renewed growth. And I encourage you to think about the seasons in all of the different domains in your life. I'm a very visual person, so I sort of see like a dashboard of, like circles in my mind of like, well, what season am I in my biological life? What season am I in, say, like our family life, our marriage, our business, all the different properties we have, right? They're all in different seasons. And then what season is the US economy in? What season is the US real estate market in? Nick follows China and the global economy, way more than I do to understand that season. And you can kind of see these dials like overlapping each other. And just like if you're, driving a car, or better yet, like flying an airplane where you have a lot of different dials that are giving you data, when you have all these different dials in your mind of the various seasons, then you start to be able to predict the future with somewhat crystal clarity. That's why we talk so much about the season. So if that was a repeat for you, I hope you loved it. I hope hearing it again maybe makes something else click, feel a little more real for you, intuitive for you. You're thinking about how it is impacting your life, your investments, those sorts of things. And if this is the first time that you're hearing it, I hope that has planted the seed for you of this really life-changing way to think about not just investing and not just real estate, but a whole way of thinking about basically all of the behavior that we have in our human lives.
I remember the first time we kind of heard this season's concept from people that we follow, that we admire, like Gary Keller and Tony Robbins, and we saw their ability to predict the future with insane accuracy, and it seemed like some sort of supernatural power they had. And over time we learned that it was really just mastering the season. So here's a few of our kind of past seasonal predictions. In December 2021, I say we, but Elaine called the pandemic. This was a bold prediction. I mean, this is like the boldest prediction right there.
I was so nervous before we went on it. We went live because I'm like, Nick, I'm a physician, but I'm a psychiatrist. I'm not an epidemiologist or an infectious disease doctor. Like, I don't know if I should be saying this because this was right as Omicron was coming out. And I'm no infectious disease physician, but it was intuitive to see that if the virus was less harmful but more easily spread, that everyone would get it. And it was also very interesting to me that this was when a lot of the rent help programs were coming to an end. A lot of them sunset at the end of 2021. And I remember thinking, this is the worst time possible for a lot of these rent help programs to come to an end. And we had more people our residents sending us emails and such in January of 2022 saying, I'm going to be late on my rent because I either have COVID or I've been exposed and I can't go to work for a week or 10 days or whatever.
Well, you predicted that too. I remember this was like a very serious conversation we had, and then shared it with y'all. You said, okay, everyone is going to get sick
in January
because the transmissibility is way up, but the virulence is way down. Those were your medical terms. So everyone's going to get sick, but no one's going to die. And so all of a sudden, there's going to be days or weeks where like 10 or 20% of the US workforce will be out of commission, and it's going to feel like the sky is falling. And because most people have very poor time orientation, like if it's dark outside right now, it's going to be dark outside forever. Like, people are not going to see that this is the end of the pandemic. And so in December of 2021, like you laid out, like it's going to look really bad, the worst. And then all of a sudden it's going to be gone. And interest rates are going to skyrocket because the economy is going to come roaring back way too hot. And then interest rates are going to shoot up to try to chase down inflation. So that was, I mean, you called it in 2021. And I remember us having that very serious conversation. Okay, like, what do we need to do from a staffing perspective? We immediately met with our team, with our leadership team, and then with all of our employees, and said, okay, everyone is about to get sick. Here's what we're going to do. And we shared with our with y'all, like you have to lock in your fixed rate debt right now. I remember like literally like pounding the table, like interest rates are about to rise faster than ever before in US history.
I would estimate probably like 70% of our emails in Q1 2022 were with bankers. We're like, we have to refi everything. Let's go. We want to get that fixed rate debt for as long as possible. Like, come on, let's go.
So just be a student of the seasons and understand that spring follows winter, and spring is a time of inflation. In February 2022, skyrocketing rates were around the corner, even though people didn't see that coming. And we told people, refi everything you can. And we said a deep, dark winter is coming, which made absolutely no sense to people at the time because people were seeing maybe there's a light at the end of the tunnel for the pandemic. And then in November 2022, we predicted that deep, dark winter would last, which at the time was not what people necessarily were expecting, because people were still in that euphoria celebrating the end of the pandemic. But we saw, where inflation was going, where, some of the geopolitical problems that were afflicting us were going to take us. In December 2023, we called midnight.
Well, in 2023, we had no acquisitions. We did close 2 acquisitions that we had gotten under contract in Q4 of 2022, just because that's how long it takes to close these large transactions. But from an acquisitions perspective, from an entrepreneur perspective, we were so bored in 2023.
Well, we launched a coaching program and
all sorts of fun stuff.
I got
with our
to
free
start a
time.
lawn and snow company, and I got to buy a bunch of equipment. That was kind of fun.
And that that's the example of winter, is that growth comes in winter, where you're like, what can I do in this winter? Like, I'm in the lodge, I'm doing okay. I don't need to worry about scarcity or lack. What else can I do? How can I create a new spring, right? We didn't have lawn in-house. We didn't have snow clearance in-house. I didn't have my Freedom and Legacy blueprint. Like, all of that came because we had this lull in the major part of our business through 2023. And we were thinking about what new springs can we create.
And then December 2023, we called Midnight of the Winter Solstice. We opened with Taylor Swift's "Are We Out of the Woods?"
Yeah,
Midnight in the Woods of the Winter Solstice. Again, this was a time when people were still talking about like soft landing and stuff, and we said, no, this is the depth of winter right now. This is a long, deep, dark, frigid winter. And then today, drum roll, we are officially declaring September 2024 the first signs of spring. Spring is right around the corner. Fortunately, this is not pseudoscience. We're not reading chicken entrails or anything like that to figure this out. There's plenty of tools for you to discern where we're at in the economic cycle. So, again, if you're listening in podcast mode, there's going to be lots of opportunities to look at graphics. This is a great one right now. Take a look at the economic clock. So last December, we called midnight of the winter solstice, and that was 6 o'clock on the clock. And between then and now, we've moved towards spring. So from 6 to, we'll call it 8:30 or maybe 8 o'clock. Not quite spring, because you're not quite feeling it yet in the common consciousness, but spring is right around the corner. And you can see falling interest rates. That's going to happen here in September. But forward-looking rates like Treasury rates, forward-looking SOFR, the forward yield curve, all those things are way down, and that's already starting to change things in our industry, in the multifamily real estate industry, and in the single family industry as well, as rates have come down. So it's not rocket science to figure out where we are. Just look at where you're at on the clock, and you can see what season you're in, what season is coming next, and what you need to do to survive and thrive in that season.
And let's give Nick his moment to talk about China. Here we are. We've arrived at the China slide. I have to, every morning, you guys, when I wake up, Nick's in the shower and I'm like brushing my teeth and helping the kids, and I have to listen to podcasts about China, and I do that for y'all. I bear that burden for the group.
I don't only listen to things about China, but the joke is when China sneezes, the world gets a cold. So even though China is not the largest economy in the world, it's one of the largest drivers of things like commodity prices, because China consumes so much oil, so that has a huge impact on energy markets. So understanding what's going on in China has a huge impact on what's going on in the United States. A year ago, we said that it was about to be known that things are going really, really poorly in China, and it was not well known just how bad it was going to be. In the top right corner is a chart. So when we did our state of the market a year ago, I think it was like on its way down. I don't remember where it was. And so this is FDI, or foreign direct investment. This is businesses like building factories. It would have been like right around here. Yeah. So imagine the whiplash. Like, I can't even wrap my brain around this, of $100 billion flooding into a country, and $100 billion has been flooding into that country for a decade, and then all of a sudden it goes to negative $15 billion in a single year. I can't even wrap my brain around what that must feel like, that all of a sudden there's like 10 factories being built all at once, and then factories are being shuttered. Like, how does that work? And there goes from infinite demand for laborers to people losing their jobs. They're seeing severe deflation. So that's the chart in the lower right-hand corner. So negative 5% deflation was clocked in for 2023. 2024 preliminary data indicates it's a little bit better than that, though. I think when the 2024 data is finalized, it will actually be worse. It could be more than 5% deflation. Deflation is a devastating thing to any economy. Worsening demographics, they're running out of young people, and there will soon be no workers to work in those factories. So maybe it's for the best that they don't have jobs for them. And the situation is rapidly sprinting in the wrong direction due to the current leadership dynamic. But y'all don't care about China. How does that impact things here? This means that Chinese interest rates are going to drop. They're already dropping. They're going to continue to drop like a rock, which has a huge impact on global dynamics and foreign exchange, and ultimately will result in lower interest rates here in the United States. It means that U.S. imports will get cheaper, because exports from China will get cheaper. And because China consumes so many imports from other countries all over the globe that when it stops consuming those imports get markedly cheaper for the United States. It means that U.S. energy will get cheaper because China is consuming far less oil than it was just a couple of years ago. Commodities, so aluminum, copper is not down for various reasons, but like things like iron are just significantly cheaper than they were just a couple of years ago. All these things put huge downward pressure on inflation in the United States. When we're able to get kind of the manufacturing inputs cheaper here, it means that everything is cheaper, which again will lead to more downward pressure on U.S. interest rates. It also means that the dollar gets stronger because China is a smaller player in the global market. More people will be relying on the U.S. dollar to exchange all those goods, oil and iron ore and everything. And it also means that more capital is flowing into the United States, and critically more jobs are flowing in the United States. So let's see what the flip side of that coin looks like here. So that's this next chart. You see stuff on the front page of CNN. The job of the news media is not to inform you, it's to startle you or to surprise you and to hold your attention. That does not mean that the media is evil or has a political agenda. They're an advertising company, like they're clickbait. So just see it for what it is. When you go to CNN.com, their job is not to inform you. It's to maybe make you feel like there's this really complex, hard to understand economic picture and you need to read all their articles to understand what's going on. But just look at people and look at energy, and you can understand the two kind of most vital forces in any economy. Energy and people are what drive every economy. So in the top right corner is jobs. So this is a foreign direct investment plus jobs. So this is like the opposite of that chart we just showed you for China. You can see back in 2010 a whopping 5,000 jobs reshored to the United States. And when we did our state of the market last year, that we had the 2022 number available, 363,000 jobs reshored to the United States, and we predicted that number would increase. 406,000 jobs reshored to the United States in 2023. So a lot of people out there are like, all these people are losing their jobs, and yet unemployment remains low. That doesn't make any sense to me. Well, when 400,000 jobs that were previously being offshore come back onshore, like that is a huge sink for labor that ultimately drives up wages and creates massive economic activity. In this lower right-hand corner, we've got an energy chart here. So last month, the United States produced more oil than ever before in its history, which is like, it's difficult to communicate what a huge statement that is, what a big deal that is. So the United States, recently became a net energy exporter, which is very good for our currency, very good for our economy, and ultimately changes the way we behaved. We're not intervening in the Middle East because we don't need their oil anymore. The shoe's on the other foot because we're now exporting oil, and you can see our oil exports are just it's difficult to convey what a huge impact this is. So what does all this mean in terms of jobs investment? We're going to see upward pressure on inflation, which feels like a bad thing, and in the short term that is a bad thing. But in the long term, it's going to be a huge windfall for the United States because we're now building, the factories that make the AI chips in the United States. We're not making those chips yet. We're making the factories that will make those chips, and those chips will be made in the United States instead of made in China. In the long run, it's going to be a downward thing on inflation, and ultimately, put downward pressure on interest rates. In the short run, though, it'll be upward pressure on inflation, interest rates, and the U.S. dollar gets stronger. In terms of energy, we already have the cheapest energy in the entire developed world by like 2x. It's unbelievable how cheap our energy is, which means that all those reshored jobs are able to be fantastically productive because they require not just labor inputs, but energy inputs. This puts massive downward pressure on U.S. inflation and U.S. interest rates, more than offsetting that upward pressure from increased wages and job creation. What you're seeing is the stage being set for the best economic outlook the U.S. has seen in an entire generation. So I came of age during the fall of the Berlin Wall. I'm a Gen Xer. I'm 41 years old. It's never looked this good. In my 41 years on this earth, it has never looked this good. We just have to not mess this up. All the dials are going in the right direction. Could be a little bumpy ahead, but all of the conditions are here for just massive positive economic growth for the U.S. economy. It's not all sunshine and rainbows. Biggest challenge is government debt. There's a chart there on the right if you want to take a look at that. 1900 at the top and the year 2030 at the bottom. And this is the federal debt as a percent of GDP. So you can see that right now we are spending money in the United States at the same rate as we did in World War II. There's extreme government deficit spending happening right now. And I don't know about you, but as far as I know, we're not in the midst of a global economic perilous situation like it's World War II, and most experts would say that there's very reckless government spending that's occurring right now. In fact, what's happening is the government is all gas. They have their foot on the accelerator, trying to push money into the economy, to try to push stimulus into the economy. And as a result, the Fed is all brake. So the Fed has had to jack up interest rates faster than ever before in U.S. history, because the government is spending so much money. So this is a critical concept to understand. Like, if your eyes glazed over, talking about China, talking about, like, all you need to take away is like things are going absolutely amazing right now, and we are set up for a generation of just unbelievable prosperity in the United States, except for this thing. If the government cannot figure out how to get their spending under control, we're going to have some very significant economic problems ahead. But if the government does rein in their spending, which they probably can, it's probably within their power, at that point interest rates will go down very significantly. So in the short run, there's a lot of disorientation that's happening, economic disorientation, as a result of the federal government being all gas and the Federal Reserve being all brake. And if the federal government would just let off the gas, the Federal Reserve could let off the brake, and inflation will come down and interest rates will come down. And man, is it going to be a great time to own $333 billion in real estate assets.
Let's talk about interest rates. This has definitely been the topic of the last, I don't know, 2 years or so, as interest rates have gone up faster than ever before in Federal Reserve history. So the Fed puts out what's called the dot plot. Again, you've heard us talk about that quite a bit. It's something you should be checking fairly regularly if you have any type of debt. Even if you don't necessarily have a plan to refinance that debt, you might look at the dot plot and say, maybe I should have a plan to refinance that debt to harvest some equity that's available. Or even if you're thinking about selling, right? It's very likely that if you have a real estate asset, that the value of that asset will go up as interest rates change, or as interest rates go down, the value will change in conjunction with interest rates. So the Fed will cut interest rates in September. Their meeting is coming up in about a week or so. And
we're throwing a party.
Yeah, we're having a little like lunch and learn. So we'll check that out in our email and our social media and stuff the day after.
Bring the booze.
The day after the Fed meeting, we're going to talk about that. It's very likely that the Fed will continue to cut rates. It's just a question of how fast, and it really depends on government spending, the jobs reports, inflation, those sorts of things. Likely at least 1% and maybe 2% in the next year and a half to 2 years. And what you see here in the dot plot, this is kind of a smaller version than usual, but what you see is all of these gray dots are each of the governors of the Federal Reserve. They each get to vote where they would like interest rates to go. And then there's the average, and you can see the trend line there. So they all agree that over the short to midterm, they'd like for interest rates to come down. It's really just a matter of how quickly and at what pace, or how much and at what pace. And then treasury rates are very different than the interest rate that's set by the Federal Reserve. Treasury rates are a market indicator of people going to the markets and buying a 5-year treasury note or a 10-year treasury note. There's treasury notes of all sorts of durations. And it's basically a loan to the government. And it prices in what the market thinks will happen in the future. So the 5-year treasury could behave very differently than the 10-year treasury, because people think that what's happening in 5 years will be very different than what's happening in 10 years. And I encourage you to check the treasury rates often, like at least once a week, if you're an active investor. And I don't necessarily mean active in terms of like you're an active versus passive, but if you have investment, which if you're on this call you probably do, you should be checking the treasury rates. It takes a second to Google it and take a look at it, and you'll see that treasury rates have come down. This is the 5-year treasury. It's a pretty steep decline since, say, when they peaked in like April or May. And a lot of the decline has happened during this summer, during the end of July and August. And so even though everyone's really focused on the Federal Reserve and what's the Federal Reserve doing and oh, they didn't cut rates at the last meeting. That was kind of up in the air, like, would they not? They ended up holding steady. The market is still speaking. And I find that talk about the Treasury is much less prevalent than talk about the Federal Reserve, even though the Treasury directly impacts debt. So as we're getting debt from local and regional banks, they ask, how would you like your debt to be indexed? And we can say, we prefer the 5-year Treasury, we prefer the 10-year Treasury, and we kind of pick based on what we think that index will show. And so we've tried to price much of our debt to the 5-year Treasury over the last 30 to 45 days because of this really rapid decline in the 5-year Treasury. Mortgage rates have gone down quite a bit. So that's been really helpful for homeowners to sell their homes, buy homes. And then the monetary supply is really tight. So in addition to raising rates over the last several years, another thing that the Federal Reserve has done in a much quieter fashion is constrict the monetary supply. So it's a way to bring down inflation in addition to rising interest rates. And they did both of those. And so that's going to continue to happen. But I think there's we're in spring, right? Like we're like a week away from spring, right? And there's a reason why we're really focused on debt. I mean, we're always focused on debt. We're always focused on interest rates, but kind of waiting for this moment. And it came later than most investors thought and not as aggressively as most investors thought, largely because of what we talked about in the last slide, where the government is just spending. And so the Federal Reserve has to pump the brakes as much as possible. But we're finally going to see that shift. And one of the things that we've taught, and that you should have a good understanding of this, is the average time between when rates start to go up and when rates start to come down. Let me repeat that. The average time between when rates start to go up and when rates start to come down is generally about 18 months when you look at all of the interest rate curves over the last 50 to 70 years. And that's approximately what happened here. It was a little longer than 18 months, but very much following that overall trend. And so you can have some sense of where interest rates will be going in the future, and it's likely that they're going to come down over the next 18 to 24 months.
Cool. A couple good questions came in. When, if ever, are these rate decreases going to hit the commercial market? So are you talking, Jenny, about when commercial real estate values will change? I just want to make sure I understand that question correctly if you want to respond there. And then do you think politicians will ever be brave enough to stop the government overspending? Absolutely. It's a cycle. And both Republicans and Democrats have been on a spending spree ever since the '08 crash. We entered a season where suddenly it was politically permissible for the government to give out free money, and politicians figured out, oh, well, I get reelected if I give out free money. And then we just kind of ran off the rails with that during the pandemic. The pendulum will probably swing the other way. It's not a sure thing. It's a little bit of a defect in democracy that politicians can give out free money. Fortunately, the U.S. government has the Federal Reserve that can apply that braking force that can be opposed to the federal government. Not every country, most countries don't have the benefit of a counterbalance to federal spending that way. Jenny said financing for refinance. So when will that's an excellent question. So we're talking about treasury rates coming down and Fed rates coming down. And Jenny's asking, when can we refinance with these rates? Right now. So we just locked in 5.6% on Georgetown townhomes that we just closed on a few weeks ago. That was with a Fannie Mae loan product that's indexed off of the 5-year Treasury. We got a 2% better interest rate. So we would have been looking at 7.6% instead of 5.6% if we had used a regional bank, because that regional bank would be more tied to prime rate, which prime rate will come down a couple of points over the next 18 to 24 months. But it's prime rates reverse looking and treasury rates are forward looking. Elaine said we pick what index that we then have a spread off of with our lenders. And understanding that can help you be very successful in curating the debt that you get for your commercial real estate. Jenny said our commercial notes are at a historic 3.6, but need to refi in 18 months. Jenny, you are in good shape, girl.
Yeah, I think it's all going to come together.
18 months, you're going to be sitting in really good shape.
I would really be thinking about putting the pedal to the metal for that refinance. I'd start getting the paperwork and the conversations and everything going in 12 months, and then start to rate lock and get your appraisals and all of those sorts of things in 14 months, and then sign some loan documents in 17 and a half months.
Nailed it. Absolutely nailed it.
And then a question from Lauren: what will the retail season look like in Q4 this year? based upon average consumer supposedly having their personal debt load at all times high.
Fortunately, I don't think that's going to have much of an impact on the overall U.S. economy or on the commercial real estate market. I don't know. That's beyond my purview to make any projections about that. Could be a bad year, could be a good year. I'm always surprised by the amount of debt people are willing to go into to like shop for the Christmas season. That's not something that I feel like I have a good connection with or understanding of. So it's very difficult for me to make any projections there.
Yeah, I would say people are so fixated on the prosperity that we've felt in the last, 5 years or so, that it's likely that that will continue, even if that means in subsequent years there's more consumer debt and those sorts of things. But wages are still really high. And so people have discretionary income to spend. We've not, I'll tell you something that we experienced personally is we have not experienced any type of increase in our rent delinquencies.
Mhm.
Our rent delinquencies are very, very low. In fact, for the last 2 months, we've had no evictions, which across a portfolio of about 1,700 doors is very good. So that
Mhm.
tells you that people have money, right? They're making their payments, they're taking care of things, and we'll see how that continues. I think it's likely that, kind of the Fed has created this thing that they wanted, this soft landing.
Mhm.
Not just because of interest rates, but because
Mhm.
of everything around energy and onshoring and all of those sorts of things. But it seems like they have accomplished that in terms of not a lot of significant pain in terms of wage loss or job loss. Maybe some pain in terms of consumers not having as much stretch to their dollar, right, at the grocery store and those sorts of things.
Mhm.
All right, let's get to our predictions for 2024, 2025. Winter gives way to spring. Woo! This is a good time. We're super excited about it. The United States continues to do absolutely amazing compared to the rest of the world. We talked specifically about China and energy. The Fed will start to cut rates in September. We think rates will come down at least 1% before our next state of the market. We tend to do these state of the markets about 9 to 12 months apart. Sustained low energy prices.
Whenever the season changes, that's
Yeah.
yeah.
Treasury rates don't decline very much. Unemployment stays under control because there's a continued labor shortage. It seems like a lot of the folks who left the labor market from COVID just kind of never came back.
Mhm.
We saw that as a country in 2008 when home builders and construction workers left that industry because of the troubles in 2008. They just never came back. They went on to, think about the times in your life when you've moved or changed a job or something like that. Like it's really hard to kind of reverse course. And so there's just this seemingly permanent labor shortage in the United States, which then causes wages to continue to rise. Inflation continues to improve, and by that we mean stabilize. The US dollar remains strong and the currency of the world. American reshoring continues, GDP growth, and then the big variable is geopolitical instability, of course, in Ukraine and Israel, but also here in our own country. The election can really change, where things are going to go in the economy, and there's good and bad, with all of the options that are available. But I would say Nick and I were kind of talking about this, like every generation sort of has the arrogance to believe like, oh, this is the worst it's ever been, or those sorts of things. But it does feel like this coming election, the two viewpoints, particularly in light of the economy, right? Strip away everything else, just talking strictly about the economy. They're more divergent than it seems like they've been
Absolutely.
before. And so that makes the upcoming spring season a little less clear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
From a high level perspective, Russia cannot prevail in Ukraine. If it does, that'll embolden China to, take action in Taiwan. And there's a 50% chance right now, according to, experts, that, China will make a move on Taiwan. They'll probably start with, an embargo and, just kind of encircling Taiwan with with their vast navy that they've built here recently. This is not a difficult thing to foresee. Like these are big moves that you can see on satellites. So it's not going to be terribly surprising when it happens, but it will be devastating to the global economy. So imagine the number two economy and the number three economy in the world being shut down simultaneously. All the chips coming from Taiwan going away. we really hope that that future doesn't come to fruition. Ukraine must prevail. The West must support Ukraine at all costs and make sure that China does not see that we lose interest over time, and they can just take Taiwan slowly and carefully, and hopefully we can avoid that geopolitical cliff. But this is something where it's right now it's a 50-50 chance that comes to fruition, and if it does, everything goes out the window here. So that's the real kicker to all these things is China and Taiwan.
When do you think China would likely make a move towards Taiwan?
2 years. 2 years. That's scientific certainty. Think about it the way a planned economy person would plan it. Like, we need to build this many ships, we need to build this many airplanes, we need to have all this infrastructure in place. Like, there is a plan for China to take Taiwan in 2026, and they're working incrementally towards it the same way they build a road or construct a new city, which sounds a little crazy to an American because it is crazy, but that's like their thought process, which makes it very easy to understand and extraordinarily easy to predict. Demographically, they also have to act very soon while they still have enough young people to execute that invasion, because it will require millions of soldiers to execute that invasion. And China is facing such a huge democratic cliff, or a demographic cliff, that by the time they get to 2030, they will no longer have enough young people to take Taiwan, which again sounds kind of crazy. But again, think about it from a central planning kind of mindset, from a communist planned economic mindset. It's like, okay, we have this many people, which to them are just like another resource, another like iron ore and barrels of oil and people. It's going to require this many resources to take Taiwan, and 2026 is the optimal year to do it, depending on weather and some other things. So yeah. Awesome.
Wow.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the U.S. real estate economy.
Yep.
A little bit of a lighter topic.
Yep.
Okay, so those are our 2024, 2025 economic predictions in terms of kind of macroeconomics, global U.S. economy. But let's dive into real estate, right? That's what we're all here to talk about. Single family home inventory is increasing, but it continues to be very, very low. We talked about when we shared our 2023 predictions and how that fared in 2024, that you can predict, because of the behavior of what has happened in 2024, what's going to happen with single family home inventory over the next couple of years. This varies widely by region. So you see that Arizona, Texas, and Florida have an inventory surplus of about 20 to 35%. That's a very different situation than all of the states here that are in the light or the dark purple, where they don't have enough inventory. Always be thinking about the law of supply and demand. It is the most important law in any economy. That's why we teach it to every high school student as part of the graduation requirements for a U.S. education. And so you're seeing that. And those are largely the states that a lot of dollars fled to over the pandemic, in terms of investment dollars, because they were really hot markets. What that meant is there was a lot of construction. So now they're oversupplied. So now there's too much inventory there. The Midwest and the North remain very undersupplied, and sales volume is down 25% year over year. The story of single family homes is going to continue to be a story of supply and demand, probably for much of our real estate investing career.
It's going to take 20 years for the United States to build their way out of this problem. It took us 15 years to underbuild our way into it. I mean, it could be 30 years from now, we still have an undersupply of single family homes. Single family homes are the best investment you can possibly make, from an appreciation perspective, because it's not something you can just snap your fingers and all of a sudden there's this abundant supply to offset price increases.
And local municipalities are really trying to come up with ways to upzone and allow ADUs and those sorts of things. But building code has just kind of raced in the direction of safety, and it's really hard to argue against safety. So it's really hard to kind of undo some of those things. But the cost to just build these homes is so much higher than it used to be, simply because of building code. And then when you add on labor and materials and interest rates and all of the other things, there's going to be some real headwinds in single family home supply for years to come, which means they're very valuable to own. So more demand than supply. We haven't built enough homes since 2008. We've been talking about that for years.
It's that top right chart. So the green bars are the new home deliveries, and or permits pulled rather. So housing starts, And that dotted gray line is the amount of homes that we need to produce to hit an equilibrium with household creation rate. So you can see there was an oversupply in the early 2000s, which is what instigated the crash. But then there has been an egregious undersupply for all but really a few months in the 15 years since then.
Mhm.
And so we now have a shortage of millions and millions of homes that it's going to take a generation to dig ourselves out of.
If you see these like little green bars here above the gray dashed line, you can kind of think of like moving them in and filling in this valley, right? Well, it barely scratches the surface. We need to kind of fill in this whole valley to catch up, so to speak. And we're decades behind. That continues to put upward price pressure on single family homes. So it's very good if you own single family homes. Right now, it's really hard to buy single family homes, but as a long-term wealth creation play, they still remain an extraordinarily good option.
In that bottom chart, we zoom into housing starts with it's more granular than that higher level chart. So that bottom one is 2020 through today. You can see the August 2024 data was just 1.24 million housing starts. This is the lowest point since the depths of the pandemic, which is just frankly is a very discouraging data point. We need more houses, and this is not, rates are down. And there's still not more housing starts because there's just so many headwinds in the marketplace right now. So not enough supply.
So typically what happens with interest rates is as interest rates goes up, the value of real estate goes down. That's what you would kind of typically predict. If you had like a true or false question, you would say, yes, that's true. And while we did see that with multifamily housing over the last 2 years as interest rates went up, we didn't see that in single family housing for two reasons. One, the debt on a typical single family home is a 30-year fixed rate mortgage, even for investors. And two, everything that we just talked about in terms of supply and demand. So the law of supply and demand trumps the law of interest rates price inverse correlation. And that's something that we've seen a lot in the single family home market in the last 2 years. So despite the fact that owning is so much more expensive, both because the actual price is higher and then also because the debt service, the monthly payment, is so much higher, prices continue to go up. Of course, this does vary by region, again, largely driven by supply and demand. And it's our prediction that rates will continue to go even higher when rates go down.
Prices will go even higher. Yeah.
What did I say?
I think you said rates.
Oh, right. Yeah, prices will go up because there's so many people, investors and families alike, that are waiting on the sidelines for kind of this mythical moment when, Jerome says we're cutting rates and they're just going to immediately call their real estate agents and say, okay, I'm ready to buy. Well, there's millions of those people. And so prices are going to go up because there's going to be even higher demand pressure on supply that's quite limited. And people just have a way of kind of talking themselves into it of like, well, we've waited for this many years, or we just got married, or we're having a baby, or the house is just too big, we can't even clean it anymore. Like whatever it is, the things that happen in human lives, they just say, you know what, we just have to finally make a move.
And it's important to call out, this is not necessarily like the common accepted wisdom. A year ago when we made that prediction, a lot of people were saying, well, there's a bubble. Single family rates or single family prices are going to crash as a result of that. And we did see that in the Sun Belt, which we did predict. And like we've got this chart of the cost to rent versus the cost to buy. A lot of people would look at this and say, oh, look, the 2006 housing bubble, there was a big crash when there was a big spread. And that's what a lot of people are saying today, is that there's a big crash coming in single family home prices. But, as people that manage a large real estate sales team, we don't have a single dial on our dashboard that says there is any way prices can go down in the future. There's just too much demand and not enough supply, and people are going to pay whatever they have to pay to own, which is really sad. Like we really love home ownership. We get a lot of people into home ownership. We really, it's a value of ours. But we don't have any reason to believe that those prices are coming down and it's going to get more affordable anytime soon.
And, the conventional wisdom in the United States is that about 30% of your income should go toward housing, but there's many places in the world where that number is much higher. It's say like 50%. So there's proven populations that do well, even with the cost of housing being say 50% of a family's salary. And so we're just kind of moving toward that in the United States. So take a look here at this graph. The cost to buy is about $2,700 per month and the cost to rent is about $1,850. So it's a good time if you're renting and you don't want to own, right? If you're like at that stage of life, or you love the freedom, or you plan to live in a bunch of different places in the United States or whatever it is. It's a hard time if you want to buy, and it's a pretty hard time if you want to invest, because that differential has to come from somewhere.
That's your profit margin. Like if the red line is higher than the blue line, like it was for all the 2010s, being a landlord is very profitable. But if the blue line is higher than the red line and you need to buy an investment property, a single family investment property, then it's unprofitable. It's going to be cash flow negative. So this is the reason why Black Swan hasn't bought a lot of SFRs lately.
It's unprofitable in terms of cash flow.
Yeah, in terms of cash flow.
We have to think about appreciation too, right?
Buying a single family home, it's the best appreciating investment that I think is available to most people today. But this is a really important chart. This could be your number one takeaway from this webinar if you're looking at investing in single family homes, or wondering how your single family investments are doing, or wondering, how Black Swan single family investments are doing, why we're not buying as many SFRs these days. It's because that blue line is so much taller than that red line. So even though we know it's a highly appreciating asset, we desperately want to buy some. It's cash flow negative. It's very difficult to get it to cash flow these days. So buying is very unappealing to investors right now, and selling is very appealing to investors, exceptionally appealing to investors right this second.
Single family home BRRRR, right? This is the bread and butter of how we built our personal portfolio over the last decade. It's tough right now for BRRRR. It's hard to get a discount because there's so many buyers that even if a home is very severely distressed, there's someone out there that is excited to do some sweat equity projects, to live in the home, defer some renovations for future years, whereas an investor typically wants to come in and take care of those renovations very quickly. Single family home prices continue to rise, even where multifamily prices have declined. Again, we talked about how they've really diverged because of the type of debt that are on these various asset classes. There's just this stagnation in the market, that there's so many homeowners that are locked into low interest rates. Our own personal mortgage rate is like 3.1% or 2.8, or it's some crate, like we could never leave our house even if we wanted to. We are like the common homeowner in the United States right now. Nowhere for people to go, even if they want to. Rehabs are expensive, very tight labor supply, materials are expensive. Single family home rent growth is better than multifamily, but it's still competing with multifamily supply. People that have the discretionary income to move into a single family home are doing so. And so maybe they might be thinking, well, I wish we could buy, but we can't, but we absolutely have to get into a single family home. But then there's also lots of people that are happy to eke out another couple of years and say a large 2-bedroom apartment, particularly with all of the amenities that are available in the multifamily space over the last several years. Single family home debt on investment properties is very hard to get right now. And it's far more expensive than multifamily debt. There's just more players in the multifamily space. There's more ability to negotiate. Single family home debt is a little bit more of a commodity, even in commercial lending. So capital velocity is very low right now. We did execute a cash out refi on our legacy portfolio, the portfolio that Nick and I own ourselves, earlier this year.
We got money out.
We did.
Even in today's rate environment, we still got money out.
Yeah. But it's certainly not like it was in 2018, 2020, 2022, when we were able to pull out a lot of capital kind of all in big chunks. This was a small amount that we basically kind of set aside for repair reserves and those sorts of things. So the conclusion here is that there's still lots of opportunity to do a BRRRR play in multifamily, but it's much stronger than single family right now. And I don't know when this will change. Selfishly, I hope soon, because I love single family BRRRR. They're just so fun. They're just like little, you just turn them so fast. You get kind of that beautiful feeling of I changed all of this.
It takes 5 years to do an apartment building sometimes.
Yeah.
You can do a single family in 30 days. It's so gratifying to make that change happen so quickly. But it's unclear to us when these market dynamics will return. So we're not going to say it's like the death of BRRRR or something like that. But I hope this is this is probably an impactful takeaway for you, that we're kind of like the single family BRRRR people. This is how we cut our teeth. This is our bread and butter. It's very profitable right now to do multifamily BRRRR, but it's much, much less profitable to do SFR BRRRR than in all the years that we've been investing. So you're not crazy if you're trying to follow in our footsteps from 2014. It was a lot easier for us back then because that rent versus own affordability, it was inverted from where it is today. Like the market dynamics do not support that business model.
If I was a young person or someone that didn't own my own single family home and I wanted to, and I knew I would be in one area for many years, or I had a young person in my life, I would be really pushing them to get a live-in renovation single family home BRRRR, knowing that they're probably not gonna be able to get all their capital out in, say, gosh, we were getting our capital out sometimes in like 5 or 6 months. I mean, it was just crazy.
Sometimes like 30 days. It was
but over a period of several years, if they're willing to swing a hammer, they're willing to roll a paint roller, they're willing to live in that home, and put sweat equity into it, I think that part of the population can really increase their wealth in a way that like will really set them on a different trajectory over the next, 5, 10, 20 years than folks who kind of throw up their hands and say, well, I'll just rent for the next 5 years while I wait for this housing inventory thing to play out. So our kids are a little too young to go out and put them in their own homes. Our oldest is turning 9.
We've got some young team members that we're setting on the path of success.
Yes, we do. We have many people that are employees of Black Swan that are in kind of that demographics. And we're like, you got to buy a home. You got to buy a home. Like nights and weekends, you need to be painting it and laying tile floor and doing all of the things, because that is going to set you on a wealth trajectory unlike anything else. And we have many people on our team that have made
Tens
40
of
to
thousands of dollars.
100,000 in equity. Now it's locked up right now. They can't access that equity, but it's on their balance sheet and they will be able to access it as rates come down over the next couple of years. Great question. When you say multifamily is less expensive debt wise, does that apply to 2 to 4 units? I'm talking more like large multifamily.
The bigger the better.
Like in the 5 million plus range.
Yeah, is to get a loan on multifamily, large multifamily, we can get stuff, we just closed at 5.6%. To get a loan on a single family home, we're at 7.6%.
It's a big difference.
It's a huge difference, huge difference.
If you have a young person in your life that you can push toward home ownership, whether that's encouragement or helping them with down payment or co-signing the loan or, whatever it is, I think you could really set someone up for like really getting them on a wealth trajectory if they're willing to do a live-in renovation, not a live-in flip, because they shouldn't necessarily plan to sell it right away, but a live-in renovation and build that equity. So our predictions for the coming year for single-family homes, it's been a mild winter for single-family homes. It's going to be a robust spring. There's just this like, kind of the way I see it is it's like a concert waiting to start, right? All these people are like right at the gates. It's like Disney World at rope drop. Like all these people are right there like, interest rates went down and prices are just going to continue to just skyrocket. Mortgage rates will continue to ease, which will unlock some pent-up demand. So, that spread between interest rates that people have on their existing homes. And they'll just say, I'm at 3.6, but if I can get 5.6 or 6, I'll go ahead and sell and then, buy my bigger home or my smaller home or move across the country, whatever it is. Sales volume will pick up a little bit, but remain lower than 2021. Inventory remains low, but small increase. Like if right now we're at, say 2 months of inventory, maybe we're at 3 or 3.5. No, we're not going to get to that healthy level, which is 6 months or more.
National average. Like you're at 8 months of inventory in Austin, Texas right now, and prices are in free fall. So just remember that it is regional, but just national inventory will go up a little bit.
We've talked a lot about home prices and starter home prices. We talked about regional variability. I think the Midwest is going to continue to do well. The Sun Belt will continue to struggle. New home starts and deliveries pick up, but they remain lower than we need. There's not the confidence in home builders, the generational confidence that's still low after 2008. And then certainly after the last couple of years with labor and materials and interest rates. Single family home rent growth will remain somewhat muted as single family home rentals compete with massive and discounted multifamily. I know you. Multifamily rents, again, particularly with, there's so many amenities, right? Pets are allowed. When we started our real estate portfolio in 2011, we were like the hot thing because we allowed pets in our single family homes. Well, everyone allows pets now. Apartments allow pets, all of the things. So more people will live in multifamily housing that has a lot of amenities, even if they want to go to a single family home. Many investors will take the win and sell and harvest their equity that way, and few investors will buy. I remain of the belief that if you can hold steady on your single family homes and instead of taking that short-term win and unlocking the equity there, hold that thing for another 15 or 20 years. And these things are just gonna, there's just they're just so valuable. I'm literally speechless. They're just so valuable.
Well, the house that you buy in our market right now for $300,000, there's no reason to believe it won't be worth $600,000, 10, 15 years from now. Like maybe even sooner than that on the current price trajectory that we're seeing.
Yep. And get the young people in your lives into housing. All right, let's talk about multifamily.
Yeah, we talked about how's the U.S. economy doing. We just talked about how the single family market's doing. Then we're going to talk about the multifamily economy and ultimately a few ideas that we have about what you might want to do to survive and thrive. I see we have 0 people have left us in this 90-minute period of charts and graphs and the spreadsheets. So we really appreciate you all being here. Glad you get so much value out of this. Let's talk about multifamily. We're talking about large multifamily, the bigger the better here. So the name of the game is supply here. When we talked about our predictions last year, we said there's going to be more supply delivery this year than there has been in 40 years. That was a very predictable thing because it takes a couple of years to build a multifamily apartment building. So all you need to do is take a look at permits. We've got a few charts here in the top right is permitting in orange, the orange line, and then units under construction is the blue bar. So you can see permitting really peaked in Q1, Q2 of 2022. We were part of that problem because we saw what so many other developers saw, which is that interest rates are going to go up. And we said, we need to double down. We're going to double the size of Stonehaven Phase 3. Instead of doing 30 units, we're going to do 55 units and lock in this low construction loan. And so did every single developer. And so now there's a flood of double the normal supply you'd expect to see. You see those deliveries in the bottom right-hand corner. So the blue bars are the number of units completed delivery and getting their final certificate of occupancy. So we're part of the problem, creating a wave of housing that is now more affordable than ever for new renters. So the big thing is that in 2025 and 2026, that's going to decline. We're going to see just crazy rent growth in that like 2026 to 2027 timeframe as a result. So there's a big bolus of supply today that's putting huge downward pressure on rental rates. But the current set of economic circumstances we're seeing, high costs, high interest rates mean no one is starting an apartment building right now. And it takes a couple of years to build an apartment building. We're going to build ours in 9 months, by the way. But most people, it takes them 2 years to start.
It took us that long to do all the planning with the city and but we planned all of that.
So we did a year of planning. Yeah, absolutely. No. So here's what rents look like. And it varies quite a bit from region to region. So in the top right corner is Austin, Texas, which you usually think of as this like really booming city. But right now, 10% of all deliveries for multifamily in the entire United States are happening in Phoenix. I can't even wrap your brain around that. 10% of the entire country happening in Phoenix, and Austin is not much far behind it. There's just so many deliveries, which means right this second you are seeing negative 4% rent growth. So that means like you're renting an apartment and it's $1,000 a month. You go to renew your lease and they're like, "Hey, would you like to stay?" And you say, "Yeah, but the rent's now $950." And they say, "Yes, please stay, no matter what." You can go get 2, 3, 4 months free rent if you're renting in these markets. Contrast that with Rochester, which is the lower right graph, and you can see a very different. There's not negative rent growth in our market, thank goodness. And for all the Black Swan investors, you can be grateful for that as well. So we're at plus 5% today, and that's in conjunction with peak deliveries, which we're a part of that problem. And we're seeing somewhere in the neighborhood of plus 10% rent growth over the next 3 years. Just a huge amount of rent growth in Rochester projected compared with only 4% over the next 3 years. That's combined in Austin. So we're seeing negative rent growth nationally with significant regional variation. Let's talk about how that impacts multifamily sales. There's a lot of things going on. Interest rates go up, which means capitalization rates go up, which means the price goes down. And investors in multifamily, they're often looking at, okay, can we like raise the rents? If we buy this apartment building, I'd be willing to pay a premium. Well, in today's market, you can't raise the rents. You probably can't raise the rents for a couple of years. And so prices have been severely depressed. Prices are down over 20%, as like a national number. I've seen deals. I mean, we are under contract on Boulder Ridge right now in Fund 4, and we're under contract for 34% less than a comparable asset that we offered on just a couple of years ago. So the pricing is just absolutely incredible. If you're one of the few operators that have the wherewithal to, you're not drowning in your existing portfolio, this is the best acquisition opportunities I've ever seen in my career. Another important note there is that we've got our per unit sales prices in the bottom right corner, and cap rate. These are national, up to the minute figures from CoStar here. So cap rate is in the top right corner, and per unit sales prices are in the bottom right corner. Green line is Class A, blue line is Class B, and orange line is Class C. So you can see that Class A, far more boom and bust. There's a reason why we don't do a lot of Class A stuff. There's a lot more risk exposure there. We really love Class B, clean, safe housing, great tenants, but less ups and downs. You can see that even though cap rates have come down, 20% plus, per unit sales prices, particularly in Class B, have not come down very much at all. So the asset class that we really focus on has done extraordinarily well. And if you ever look at deals that we underwrite, you'll see that we don't really look at cap rates all that closely. It's not something we talk about a lot, like in our deal webinars. We look a lot at per unit purchase price, at price per pound, because that's something that varies less over time. It's less subject to the whims of the market. This has had a huge impact on sales volume. So in our market in Q1 through Q3 of 2022, there's $338 million of sales volume, which sounds crazy because it's a relatively small market here, but our market in Rochester, it punches way above its weight. It behaves more like a community of like 1 million than a community of 250,000. So 338 million in 2022. In Q1 to 3 of 2024, right now, $66 million in sales volume, an 80% decline from 2022 to today. So very few transactions are occurring. That's one reason why we're looking at deals like the Boulder Ridge deal in our surrounding communities right now, because it's very difficult to buy right now. If you can buy, like, you can get phenomenal deals, but there's not very many, very much inventory out there. It's hard to put a deal together. We are seeing that inventory start to increase dramatically, certainly like the private inventory. So I hate to say this, but I am going to put on an insurance shirt on Thursday to go secretly walk a apartment building for sale. But it's not for sale, and the property management company can't know that it's being offered for sale because the seller doesn't want to tell the property management company. So they're trying to secretly offer it for sale, and I'm going to capture photos. I hate this. It's like, it's not in integrity, but we're seeing a ton of these deals right now where the seller wants to sell but doesn't want to actually market the property. Almost one of these deals comes across my desk almost every single day right now. It's just an incredible amount of secret inventory that's out there that's not quite on the market, but it would like to be if it could.
All right, you want to talk about operations?
I would love to talk about operations.
Oh, I know. Operations in China.
So operations, that's where all the gold is. This is the hard work that other people ignore. People like to talk about getting an amazing deal and flipping it for a quick profit or whatever, but this is where all the gold is. Operations are in a shambles for most kind of mediocre operators out there. For years, they could just kind of adhere to market norms and do okay. That doesn't work anymore because your average insurance premium has gone up 30 to 50% year over year. Insurance is going to be your number one controllable expense. So it's typically debt service, property taxes, and then insurance. So with Georgetown, for example, we got 3 different quotes. Our initial quote was $160,000 for Georgetown. I spent probably 100 hours of my time on insurance negotiations. I mean, thousands of emails with different carriers. And eventually I got 2 different carriers to partner together to like split the deal to create this win-win deal. And we were able to optimize that insurance cost down to $50,000. So from $160,000 to $50,000. So we added $110,000 net operating income of that asset. We added $2 million of value to that asset on a cap rate basis. Most operators are not willing to spend 100 hours herding cats trying to get insurance companies to partner together to save $100,000 on insurance costs. You have to be a gritty operator to create that value.
I have people that are single family home owners that have emailed me over the last couple of days about their rising insurance premiums. Shop around. So this person, excuse me, I have a little tickle in my throat. This person had insurance rates with an insurance broker, and the prices have gone up astronomically. And they asked me, who's insuring your single family home portfolio? And I said State Farm, and they got a quote from State Farm, and it was much less expensive. So shop around. Like, insurance is harder right now than it has been in years past, but there are still opportunities out there.
Someone had a comment here based on this multifamily prediction. Looks like right now it's an excellent time to start ground up multifamily development. By the time the multifamily property completes, is about the time in 2026 when we're predicting strong rent growth. That's a very wise prediction and completely unrelated. We just broke ground on a brand new multifamily building, and many of our peers are like, "Isn't now a terrible time to build?" Well, no. By the time that project is done, we'll be able to refi into a lower interest rate. Rent growth will be kicking in. Winter is the best time to grow, my friend. So an astute observation. And if you would like to invest in that multifamily building, Black Swan Fund 4 is open. Property tax increases. We're seeing huge property tax increases. Just municipalities are coming up short, and they're trying to squeeze multifamily owners. Labor cost increases. We're seeing a 30% increase in labor costs, particularly for like maintenance and construction labor since the pandemic. Material cost increases. So here's a photo of a Mana washer. This is like an infamous thing. It has not changed in like decades. It's the basic washing machine you can get at Lowe's, Home Depot. This is actually this was from Menards. So before the pandemic, I could buy this machine all day for $350. Today, I happen to catch a sale. So list price $650 for this, the worst appliance money can buy that has not been changed in 20 years, but it's on sale. It's like add it to the cart to see the real price for $480. So that's between a 37 and an 85% increase in the cost of a washing machine in just a few years. So like when you see CPIs at 3%, that's nonsense. Like there are things where the price has doubled in just the last few years. You're not crazy. It's very real. And these are real problems that operators need to face.
Absolutely. Let's talk about our multifamily predictions for 2024, 2025. I think I did single family, so I'll let you let you do multifamily.
Rachel, I appreciate you putting the link to Fund 4 right on cue. That was masterfully done there. All right. So our prediction for 2024, 2025 is that the freezing, brutal winter is finally over, which sounds crazy because right now the sentiment is very poor, but we believe that spring is right around the corner. We believe that the next time we do this webinar, people will be celebrating like the next renaissance of multifamily, and the attitude will have changed.
And that makes sense, right? Like if think about if you live in a climate where there's snow, like a snowfall for us in Minnesota, it can snow into April. It's somewhat unlikely, but a snowfall that happens in late March, like hits you psychologically different than a snowfall that happens in January
or April.
In January, you're like, yeah, of course, like it's winter, like this, this sucks. It is what it is, put the boots on. But in March or April, you're like, I don't know if I can do this again. Every year, I'm like, Nick, I don't know why anybody lives in Minnesota. This is the dumbest place in the country to live. Why are we here? I hate this place. There's no sun. Kids are freezing.
I wish this was a hypothetical.
And then come like May or June, I'm like, this is the Garden of Eden. Everything's so green. It's so beautiful here. This is the breadbasket of the country. Everywhere you go, there's just life and green everywhere. Like, it makes sense that the psychology of investors right now is really struggling because we're at the end of winter, and that's when your psychological reserves are the lowest. It's when you can make the most opportunity for yourself if you know that spring is coming.
So winter is over, but things don't improve fast enough. The tide continues to go out, and we continue to discover more naked swimmers. Some of the people in the industry call these zombie deals. So they're dead, but they're still walking around. I mentioned that example of an apartment building where you bought that apartment building for $10 million with a 80% LTV loan. So $8 million loan, $2 million down. And that apartment building went down in value by 30%. And you didn't do like deep value add. You didn't improve operations. Your operational expenses have gone up. So you're now underwater by $1 million. That lender's not going to foreclose on you because they know that they would be upside down. So they're going to keep you in place, keep you working as hard as possible, maybe try to replace you or something like that. But they're certainly not going to foreclose on that asset. And as that value starts to recover and come back to $8 million, that's when that foreclosure is going to take place. It won't be like a traditional foreclosure. Just the bank will approach the operator and say, listen, you're done. Your limited partners are wiped out. I hate to say this, like I'm not a doom and gloom person, but many of the people who are on this call right now, if you're invested in non-Black Swan syndications, and I say that just because I know that we're not underwater on any of our deals, but if you're invested in other syndications, there's a very good chance that you're in a deal that's dead and you just don't know it yet because it's so far underwater that the bank's willing to kind of work with that GP until prices recover enough that the LPs can be wiped out and a foreclosure can take place.
One of the things that we talk about is, this is a little unrelated from the slide, but I want to bring home this point right now because it fits right here, is there's been this chatter in the industry over the last couple of years that, oh, this is such a safe deal because we have such low LTV. We're at 55, 60, 65%. And I mean, we have just been, we roll our eyes at that. We're like disgusted by the deceit that's kind of encapsulated in there. And really what that means is the bank didn't think that it was a strong enough deal to lend, you know, the typical norm, which is like 75 or 80%. But think about that. If a deal is worth 10 million, and the bank brings 8 million and the investors bring 2 million, and there's some sort of catastrophic loss, well, then the most investors can lose is 2 million. But if the deal's worth 10 million and the bank brings 6.5 million and the investors bring 3.5 million, which maybe seems like a safer deal on paper, but there's a catastrophic loss, well, then the investors just lost 3.5 million. And also, if the deal is worth, say, 6.5 million, but there's 8 million of debt on it, the bank is very unlikely to foreclose because they know there's not room to go there. They're going to work with the operator. They're going to work things out. And so just planting that seed again, because I feel like we've like tried to bring that up in the last several years. And there's just been this sort of like euphoria of like, oh, this is a low, safe, low LTV deal. And of course, you never want to be so over leveraged that you're negative cash flow. For us, that's like a hard stop. Absolutely not going to happen. But higher leverage is often very protective. And I think people are going to feel that with the capital loss that happens of like, man, if this had been a 20% down payment instead of a 40% down payment, there would have been half as much capital loss. It would have been the bank that was holding that back.
And that is so profound what Elaine just said.
Well, you taught me.
So and let's talk about how that could work to your advantage for just a moment, because this is something that we think about. Fortunately, we've never been in this situation, but it's something we think about. So let's say that asset went down in value by 30%.
So we're 10 million.
Yeah, we're
and now
it's
worth 7 million.
And now it's worth 7 million. In the scenario where your investors brought 3.5 million because it was a safe, low leverage deal, your investors are nearly wiped out. Now your lender's not going to foreclose, so that's fantastic, but your investors are nearly wiped out. And they have so much more at risk, almost twice as much at risk as in the 80% LTV scenario. But let's say that you're in that 80% LTV scenario. So the bank's now underwater by $1 million. If I was a GP in that scenario, I'd go to the lender and say, man, you've really gotten yourself into a really unfortunate scenario, haven't you? Hope we don't have any lenders on this call, by the way. Could we work something out where we get like a 5-year extension to our loan term? Because we know that on a 5-year runway, we're going to be able to get back to 10 million. We're going to be able to make our investors whole. But we know that a year from now, when the market recovers and we're at 8 million, you might be tempted to take us out if like our loan matures or something like that. So high leverage is ultimately one of your best defenses in the event of like a value loss. That's something that we teach on a lot. I know it's a little counterintuitive, but it's a really powerful concept if you master it. And yes, unfortunately, a lot of GPs, they brag about how they have all these low LTV deals. Every GP out there, they're going to take every penny of leverage they can get. Just the lender didn't think it was a good enough deal to give them better leverage than that. So love it. That's a beautiful point, babe.
Back to our predictions.
All right. So the tide continues to go out. This process is going to take years. Many operators are going to exit the business. Rescue capital that you hear a lot of people kind of bragging about right now or talking about virtuously, it's going to shape shift from angels into sharks. Those rescue capital people, they're gonna devour the LPs. I hope you are not in a deal where rescue capital is involved, or it's very likely that that your capital has been lost. You just don't know it yet, and you may not find out for several years. There's going to be some more capital calls, but honestly, not that many, because LPs have kind of learned that they shouldn't pay those capital calls. So there's no point in the GPs issuing them. There's going to be lots of chatter for rescue capital for new deals, but a lot of those capital raises are probably going to start to fail. Sales volume will increase, but still remain much lower than 2021, 2022. So maybe it'll be a 60% reduction instead of an 80% reduction or something like that. Maybe a 50 or a 40% reduction. Listing volume is going to increase dramatically, but there's not a lot of equity out there, and so it's going to be hard to put deals together. It's really interesting when brokers call me right now. They're like, okay, so you guys have money in the bank. You got your investors. Like you're doing deals right now, right? Like before they are even willing to talk about the deal, they're grilling us on our investors, our investor base, how much cash we have right now. It's just brokers are desperate for equity because it's very difficult to put a deal together right now for most people. I'm grateful for the amazing ecosystem that we have here. We try to pour into y'all, and we really appreciate you investing in our deals. It's allowed us to get some absolutely insane deals this year in Fund 4. Institutional buyers re-enter the marketplace and profit handsomely. So we just saw Blackstone execute a pretty massive deal. We're going to see Berkshire, BlackRock. We're going to see all the big players, Starwood, come back in force. Prices increase from the 2024 bottom, but remain much lower than the 2021 to 2022 days. Lots of regional variation. Sunbelt struggles. Midwest does well. More new units delivered than in 40 years. So this is a recycle of our prediction from last year, but it takes 2 years to build an apartment building, so we can use that prediction for 2 years. Regional banks continue to work things out with their customers while debt funds devour their customers at a faster pace. So we've already talked about a lot of those points. I don't think we need to dig into that, but you're welcome to pepper our chat with questions if you like.
All right, let's finish up our presentation here. Talking about, what we're doing. It's one thing to make predictions. It's another to show you exactly we're putting our money where our mouth is. So we are planting the seeds that we saved through winter. We deployed a massive war chest, or we built up a massive war chest in 2020, that should say 2024. We launched Black Swan Fund.
We built it in 2023, but then we deployed it in 2024. We were raising capital all through 2023, doing investor call after investor call after investor call, saying, listen, get on the wait list. We're not buying anything right now. I don't know when we will, but when we start buying, they're going to be the best deals we buy for the next decade.
I see how you're thinking about that. So in 2023, we didn't have a new fund, which really messed up my numbering because I thought in 2021, we'll have Fund 1. In 2022, we'll have Fund 2. And then in 2023, we had no fund. But in 2024, we had Fund 3 and Fund 4 because there was just been so much deal flow and so much opportunity. Warren Buffett says, be greedy when others are fearful, and we are absolutely practicing that. This will be the largest acquisition year in the history of our company. We Uptown Apartments, Baycrest, Bayswater, and Stonehaven and Georgetown. Those are all already closed on. And then we have 2 deals under contract, Boulder Ridge and Mandolin Place. So very excited about that at a time when a lot of people are nervous. We are more, what's the word that I'm looking for? We are very interested, right? There's that energy, that nervous energy. We don't have that. We have a curious energy of how can we make the best of this year? How can we be greedy when others are fearful? We've not bought a lot of single family. The season just isn't right for that. We, keep sharpening our pencils, keep going back. We have bought a few. We try to buy in the deep, dark part of the Rochester, the actual winter, not the economic winter. In January, February, when there just aren't a lot of buyers. It's dark at 4:00 in the afternoon, snow on the ground, those sorts of things. But then the rest of the year, it's just really hard to pick up deals. So we hope we can get back to a time when we're acquiring a lot of single family, but right now the season just isn't right. We've been very focused on operations, right? We've talked about that ad nauseum over the last year to 18 months. We completed our construction at RDS. We completed our construction at Stonehaven Townhomes. We worked our hearts out to build a short-term rental operation. We now have 51 short-term rentals across our apartment buildings. Very excited, and things are really stabilizing. We've hired a second shift crew to help with customer service and answering booking inquiries and those sorts of things.
They're on shift right now.
They are, yeah. Leveraging our team, so deepening our vertical integration, lawn care, snow removal, maintenance, some higher skill maintenance, like some small tree removal, boiler work, those sorts of things. And right now we have 6 refinances in flight. So we haven't, signed anything quite yet because we're waiting for
Come on, Fed.
the Fed to have their meetings in September and October but we anticipate having many refinances in Q4 of 2024 to harvest a lot of the equity that we've created over the last several years. And we're working hard on getting debt that's indexed to the Treasury instead of prime. So that's one of the great things about working with local regional banks is this is all just a point of negotiation. And so at times we lean on prime and at times we lean on Treasury. And right now we're leaning hard on Treasury and getting our debt indexed to that, and are excited about the refis that we have in place. I think we have 2 appraisals like
tomorrow.
Oh, wow. No. I think it's next week.
Wednesday.
Wednesday.
2 days. We have 2 appraisals, and then we've got another appraisal the week after that, and another appraisal the week after that.
Yeah. So very excited about that, and just kind of looking ahead to spring and
the week after that.
Yeah. And excited about those refis. Operations some more. You wanna take it away?
So talked about Georgetown going from 160K to 50K in insurance cost. We've reduced our lawn cost by 50%. We've reduced our snow cost by 50%. This is all stuff that's happened in the last 12, 18 months. We've had a 30% reduction in flooring cost. We spend a lot of money on flooring, so that's a huge item right there. We talked about how that washer has gone from $350 to $650. Well, the crazy thing is the premium washer, it went from like $600 to $700. So it used to be twice as much as the basic appliance. So now we just get top of the line appliances. Like we can't get a cheap appliance to save.
But labor is so expensive.
Right?
You're like, gosh, if I have to pay someone to deliver this, and how about the old one and those sorts of things, if I have a better appliance that might last another couple of years, then I'm kind of amortizing that labor cost over more years, right? Does that intuitively make sense? So that's part of it too.
Yeah. Huge energy efficiency savings efforts. So we saved 50% year over year at City Hall, just as an example. So this isn't just kind of trivial. Like we're cut into the bone, and not in any ways that impair our tenant experience, but just doing some really clever things with utilities. Optimizing our facilities and cleaning costs. Some of our assets we've shaved 20-30% off our facilities and cleaning costs in the last year. We just hired a new full-time employee who's leaning into advertising. We spend about $17,000 a month on advertising right now for attracting tenant leads. We don't spend a penny on investor marketing. That's all organic. And we're like, man, how can we get organic lead generation for our tenants the way we do for our investors? How can we replicate Rachel? Sophie is Rachel's clone, by the way. So hopefully we're able to replicate that in our tenant domain, and that would save $17,000 a month to our apartment buildings in advertising expense there. Vertically integrating our legal and accounting. Elaine, I overheard you having a meeting on that today. Running a private equity fund is really expensive from a legal and accounting perspective, and we're bringing a lot of that stuff in-house, which saves a huge amount of cost and administrative overhead to our investors. I actually have a list that we went over with our entire team for 30 minutes today. We have over 100 initiatives in flight right now to improve the operations of our business. Literally, I sat down with all of our property management staff and said, give me every idea you have to improve our buildings and our operations, and people. We can hang, art here. We can improve, put bike garages in here. We can just different ideas on things we can improve. And most of those things were already on the list in some form or another. So we have over 100 initiatives in flight right now to improve the operations of our company. Yep. My favorite chart here, by the way, is this the blue dots. So we've got 2 properties. This is our average per unit per month water bill. So most of our properties, it's about $10 to $15 a month. And then we've got 2 properties where it's over $40 a month. And we know, hey, we need to literally put boots on the ground to go patrol those units, go interview the tenants. Hey, are you all just like running the shower continuously? I mean, it's not easy to play detective to figure these things out, but we know we can cut the water bill in half on those 2 properties. And it takes we have a person who analyzes thousands of utility bills a month to put together these analytics. It's very, very, very difficult to actually dial into this level of granularity on the data, because we have one of those outliers. We have it troubleshot down to about 20 or so units, 20 individual units. So we have to go walk those individual units where we know the water bill excess is coming from.
A couple of questions here. Do you mind sharing the rationale of going with the treasuries instead of prime? And how do you negotiate that with lenders? So the treasury, the 5-year treasury and the 10-year treasury are market driven. They're people going to the United States government and buying those treasuries. and they price in how people think the treasuries will behave over the 5-year period or the 10-year period. And people see that interest rates are likely to come down because the Fed says so. So in the many slides back, we showed how the 5-year treasury has dropped quite a bit over the last like 60 days or so, even though the Fed has done nothing. So that's why we're trying to index off of the treasury rates right now. And you just ask lenders. They at some point in, and by this I mean like commercial lending, which can be single family homes, certainly large multifamily. They'll ask at some point in the negotiations, like, do you want to be indexed off of prime or 5-year treasury or 10-year treasury or SOFR?
You might need to ask. They probably won't.
Yeah. Or in your term sheet, it will say, SOFR +1 or whatever. And you say, hey, what do you think about indexing off of the 5-year treasury? And you just kind of pick the treasury or you picked the index that's most favorable to you. And in general, they say yes. And they have to index off of something. So that's why. And then how did you get insurance to go down so much? Yeah. We worked on that a lot in Q1 and early Q2.
Yeah. So it's hard to get insurance at all. So we reached out to multiple different insurance brokers, and we keep the vast majority of our business with State Farm for many reasons. State Farm said that this building now exceeded what they wanted their global exposure to be. And so Georgetown is a 16-acre campus. It's an enormous property. And different carriers also had somewhat similar feedback. They're like, yeah, this property is a little bigger, a little more a little more insurance exposure risk than we would like to have in a single asset. And so I had to put forth this idea to say, how could we split this up so like 2 different insurance carriers could share the risk on this? And it's split into multiple phases. So we said, okay, State Farm, how about you take these, you take the majority of the units in these phases, and then this other insurance company, you take the minority units in these phases. We tried to stack it up. We tried to make it so that one insurance company was covering a higher deductible spread. It's like a deductible buy down or buyback. And that didn't work. We tried 10 different strategies to get insurance companies to partner together to pool their risk, because fundamentally that was the problem. Is it was such an enormous property that insurance companies did not like how much risk it was on their books. So we just created a win-win deal. I mean, we sat down with the insurance carriers, not just the broker, and said, what would a perfect policy look like for you? What would be the most affordable policy you could write? Where are the pain points? And we had to go back to our lender, which is Fannie, who hates to negotiate. Very difficult to get them to negotiate on anything, and said, how can you meet the needs of these 2 insurance carriers to come up with a win-win deal for all of us here? So it was very challenging, unbelievably challenging, but we were able to add $2 million of value to that asset with that. Yeah, I'm going to spend 100 hours of my time, if that's what it takes, to 100 hours with Fannie Mae and every insurance company under the sun. If that's what it takes to make $2 million, I'm going to go ahead and do that.
I'm sorry you had to rub your eyes.
It was rough. It was really rough.
Nick and I's office are side by side, so I can hear him on calls. And sometimes when I hear the energy really coming down, I come in and I rub his shoulders. I'm like, you can do this. I have confidence in you. I believe in you. Can I get you some water? You've got this.
Yeah.
Do you want to go get some sunshine? And he's like, no, I just need to make another phone call. I'm like, okay, well, I'm here for you if you need anything. Yeah. Our rent growth has been really strong. Part of that is that we're in the Midwest. Part of it is our renovations, really focusing on marketing, our leasing performance, making sure that phone is answered right away, that people have a great leasing experience, a great renewal experience. If you have some real estate that you personally own and you're thinking about how can I get the highest rents, something as simple as a really good photo shoot can take you a long way of attracting as many leads into your funnel as possible so that you can have the highest rent possible. So we share these on our quarterly updates. Our next quarterly update is coming in October. In the interest of time, we'll dive into more detail during that presentation, but you can see some staggering rent growth over the last year, despite the fact that there's been a lot of headwinds in the country as a whole, and particularly in certain markets. The Midwest is doing really well. Rochester is doing well because of the Destination Medical Center initiative. There's population growth and job growth in this area. We're adding on, value to our units by doing renovations, our leasing team. So it's very possible to succeed even when there's a lot of headwinds, and we're excited about our rent growth.
We're at close to 10% portfolio-wide rent growth during that year-over-year time frame.
And again, our vacancy is the lowest it's been ever in the history of the company.
Sub 2% vacancy right now. Lowest it's been. Yeah. And so 10%, year over year rent growth at a time when in our market it's 0.5% rent growth, and it's negative rent growth nationally. So we've had exceptional
there's a
rent growth.
cycle there that because we have so few units to rent right now, we've just raised the rents on everything, and we can make our screening criteria stricter and other things. So there's a very virtuous cycle that's happening as our vacancy rate is historically low. It's the lowest it's been in the company for like the last 5 or 6 weeks.
Long time.
Yeah, very excited. All right, let's talk a little bit about strategy. We have a couple slides here on strategy and kind of, what we might do. Just a reminder that we don't give investment advice. This is entertainment and informational stuff. We told you our predictions. We showed you, what we're doing with our portfolio.
Solid reminder.
If you're an investor, that's, what we're doing with the collective capital that we have in these deals together. And then we're going to talk about some strategy that you might do. We try to give some suggestions for single family, multifamily, short-term, long-term, if you're an active investor, passive investor. So that's what we'll wrap up our presentation with here. But anytime you're making an investment decision, talk to your own trusted advisors before doing so.
So spring is around the corner. The most challenging thing is to believe that in your heart. So the only thing you have to do to be very successful in any aspect of life is to believe something that is the opposite of like the common consciousness, to be right, and to go all in on that decision. I'm going to say that a second time because that's such a crucial thing to understand. And you only have to do this a few times in your whole life. Warren Buffett would say, if you do this 6 or 10 times in your life, you're set for life financially. All you have to do to be extraordinarily successful is to believe something with extreme confidence that is the opposite of the common consciousness belief, and to have the power to take massive action on that thing, and ultimately to be right. Spring is just around the corner. I know it doesn't feel that way right now, but it truly is. And the worst thing you could do right now is to act like you're still in winter. So don't succumb to the fear that's in the marketplace. Don't go pencils down. Go look at deals. I would recommend avoiding retail or office.
There's just too much discovery.
I don't know if you need to say that out loud, but it's pretty rough out there. Avoid short-term holds. Right now it seems like it's a poor outlook for commodities, precious metals, gold, just because China is not buying those commodities anymore. Poor outlook for oil and gas because we are producing more oil and gas than we've ever produced, and that's keeping prices very low. I'm loving this $3 a gallon gas, but I'm glad I don't own any oil rigs right this second. It's a poor outlook for stocks and other paper assets. If you look like price earning ratios and stuff like that, it seems like it's kind of peak in the stock market. Now would be a great time to sell your stocks. Again, that's not financial advice. Just that's our entertainment that we're offering there. Don't go selling your stocks just because I told you so. Please talk to your advisors. From a debt perspective, it's starting to be a good time to refi, though conditions will likely improve in the near future. We're about to pull the trigger on a lot of refis because we just have so much lazy equity that we would love to unlock from our projects that have done really well over the last few years. Lending is
and we tend to not be afraid to refi something in, say, Q4 2024 and then do it all again in Q4 2026. Like we just have the desire to beat ourselves up.
Yeah.
But if you're like, hey, I want to refi, one time in the next 4 to 5 years, I'd probably wait a little further into 2025, kind of the timeline I gave for Jenny there. But if like, hey, I'm going to go after it, and you can refi when rates come down this Q4, and then deploy some of that equity into some new deals, and then be thinking, yeah, I have the grit to then refi again in 2025 or 2026, 2027. By all means, go after it.
And that's why we say avoid debt with prepayment penalties, as you will likely want to refi again soon. And finally, now is a terrible time to lock in fixed rate debt indexed to prime or Fed rate. If you're going to lock in fixed rate debt, you really want to be indexed off of a 5-year treasury or 10-year treasury. Question came in, understand about avoiding office, but wondering what's the rationale to avoid retail. So your mileage may vary. I don't know if you already have a retail portfolio, if that's an area of expertise for you. As a person who unfortunately owns 30 retail bays, tens of thousands of square footage of retail space, I can tell you that we have a much easier time filling our residential space than we have filling our retail space. Amazon is going to continue to devour traditional retail. E-commerce will, and some retail is going to do well, other retail will not. It's going to be really difficult to predict who the winners and who the losers will be. I could go deep into that rabbit hole, but right now it's not a good time to be buying retail space, most likely.
Yeah, there's just a lot of discovery
Yeah.
that's yet to be had.
Yep.
All right, so we
We,
talked.
we turned down an 8 cap for Class A retail in our area a few weeks ago. I winced when I turned that down, but like on paper, it's printing money. But God help us if we lose that anchor tenant. It's just there's just so much risk and uncertainty that goes with that. So we turned down an 8 cap on Class A space.
That must have been a fast turn down because you never even talked to me about it.
I did not.
You were just like, yeah, nope.
It was a very good meeting, very great pitch, great property, but no, absolutely not.
All right, so we talked about what to avoid, what to do.
So now would be a great time to deploy the cash you have saved through winter. So don't believe what we say, believe what we do. We built up a war chest over the course of about 18 months through 2023, and we are going all in. And we would say right now is the time to go all in. Multifamily is probably the best opportunity right now because prices have come down. Prices have not come down like in industrial warehouse. Self-storage is down a little bit, but I think price discovery is really yet to occur in self-storage. Right now is probably a decent time to invest in a multifamily syndication if you trust the operator and they aren't drowning in their old deals. Unfortunately, 90% of operators did variable rate deals during the pandemic, and so they are drowning in those old deals. So if they're raising capital, like make sure they're not raising capital to bail out one of their old deals. Make sure you're actually getting into a new deal that they're buying at a discount. So it's probably a good time to get into syndication. Just make sure you really trust that operator. SFR Burr is tough right now, but it remains safe. So you're gonna have low velocity of capital, but it's gonna be a really safe play. And we've never said this before. Now's a pretty good time to flip.
We've never said that before.
Never said it before, but you can make pretty darn good money flipping right now on SFRs.
Not in Arizona, Texas, or Florida, though.
Yeah, good call.
Go back to the map, look for the light purple, flip there.
Good call, babe. And the next 1 to 2 years would be a good time to sell. We've never said that before. We're the hold people, but the truth is, single family homes, they're going to appreciate. They're going to continue to appreciate when rates get to about 5.5%. Prices, they're going to skyrocket. I had to struggle not to use an expletive right now. The prices are going to go crazy.
They're going to bloom and skyrocket.
They're going to bloom and skyrocket. We'll explain that.
Inside joke.
That will be so when interest rates hit 5.5, if you're thinking about selling a single family home that you own, sell it. And we don't typically counsel people to sell, but that will be a very favorable time in the market cycle for you to get out. I would say that STR we remain skeptical about STR despite the fact that we have 51 of them. And we would caveat that if you can find an area that has a really mature regulatory regime that's a stabilized market, that's probably a great place to operate in STR. And to be honest, it might be the only way you can buy a single family home and get it to cash flow is by operating it as a short-term rental. Just be really careful. Dallas just outlawed Airbnbs, like with billions of dollars in loss. You want to be in a market that's already kind of had that regulatory regime come into place, and you understand how to navigate it. It's a moat that protects your asset from competition. And if it already has that regulatory regime in place, it's unlikely to radically change after that. Now maybe a good time for you to do build for sale if you know what you're doing. I've thought
if you know what you're doing.
Yeah, if you know what you're doing, but now's maybe a good
there's
time
so
to get
few
into
starts.
That. Yeah. It's going to be a huge gap in the market as those rates come down. And now's a good time to consider variable rate debt. So Elaine teased this at the top of the program here. Blasphemy, I know, but rates are coming down. So if you're indexed to prime, you're going to do quite well. And so RDS, I added some sizzle by saying we're about to get $20 million variable rate debt. So RDS, it's a $20 million loan. And we're getting a variable rate loan at 7.5% that can float all the way down to 5.5% as prime goes down. And it's a 3-year note. And you saw that forward yield curve, which means on average, we'd be looking at like a 6.5% interest rate over the life of the loan. Hopefully all followed that. So far, so good. We're then getting what's called a swap. So you have the ability to, banks can trade variable and fixed rate debt with each other to make sure they don't have too much interest rate exposure. And so another bank is going to swap our variable rate loan for fixed rate. So they're going to give us 6.5% fixed over the next 3 years because the forward rate curve shows that on average, that variable rate loan would yield a 6.5% interest rate. So what that means is instead of getting, like a 7.25% interest rate or something like that fixed, we're going to get a 6.5% interest rate fixed. And we're not going to lock that until at least one Fed meeting from now. So hopefully rates actually come down. We'll call it a half a point in September. I don't think it's actually come down half a point, but it would be nice if it did. We might get close to like a 6.0% fixed rate loan from a regional bank. So really favorable rates. So I don't want to get deep in the weeds on what a swap is or how any of those things work, but all you need to know is we're getting variable rate loans on very large assets because just the numbers make a ton of sense right now. There is no chance rates are going up, and there is a very good chance rates are going down a lot. So now is actually a very good time to get variable rate debt.
Couple of good questions. What do you think about single family homes and high cost of living neighborhoods that have continued to have rent growth, hard to cash flow, but market appreciation has continued over the past 5 years? I am pro holding single family homes. So, people want to sell. And so we're trying to give, guidance to people like, hey, if you're thinking to sell, like, this might be how you time it. Earlier in the presentation, I said, this is a time to, if you have the ability to hold through and either find a creative way to unlock that equity or to just say, hey, that's my equity on my balance sheet, and I'm really using this for a long-term wealth play, hold those SFRs, because we're going to continue to be in this supply crunch for a couple of decades. I would say at least 10 years. So I say kind of set it and forget it and check every 18 months or so and see, is there a way to unlock some equity on my SFRs? But I am pro hold, despite the fact that if you want to sell, now would be a good time over the next couple of years. But if you are younger or you have a longer time orientation or you're thinking more about generational wealth, those types of things, if you think you can hold for 10 years, I think you'll be very, very happy with yourself in 2034.
There's someone at our conference who owns a single family home in Westchester in New York. So like one of the highest cost living areas. So this is like $1 million single family home. That's a modest single family home in that zip code. And their note was at, a favorable rate, and they're getting like $5,000 a month in rent on it. And they're like, well, we're only at like a 0.5% rule, right? Because I've got $1 million house that I only rent for $5,000 a month. They're able to cover the mortgage. And I said, like, you would be crazy to unload that property. Like the appreciation is built into that zip code. There's no way it's not going up a lot. It could go up 10% a year for the next 10 years. You'd have to sell that house and go buy like 10 houses in Georgia to come up. I just realized I was on a call earlier today doing a little bit of coaching with someone selling a house in Georgia. So sorry if you're still on the line. You'd have to go buy 10 houses in Georgia to add up to what you get out of that one house in Westchester. And I don't think that's a good trade. So that's the exact coaching that I gave someone.
Absolutely. And then John asked on our things to avoid, explain the rationale for avoiding hold periods of less than 5 years. Part of it is that we just tend to be long-term hold people, and there's a lot of costs associated with buying and selling with make ready and mortgage tax and broker commissions and all of those sorts of things. So that's part of it. But in particular, what did you have in mind there?
So I kind of didn't want to speak to this, but if you're getting into a deal that's a short-term deal at this phase of the market cycle, there's a very good chance you're actually getting into some sort of rescue play that's not being disclosed to you. I know that sounds.
Oh, I see. So you're not necessarily talking about.
I mean, don't get any
single family homes, because here you're saying single family homes, there's a potential for flip.
Yeah, go back.
You're talking specifically about syndications.
I said there's like, now's a good time to get into real estate syndications and stuff like that.
Got it.
But, and there's a lot of thought that goes into that, but that's actually one of the big ones is like, you want to get into something that's a 5-year business plan.
I think in general, you could probably just say avoid rescue capital.
Right. But there's a lot of rescue deals that are being put together that aren't even being disclosed that they are rescue deals. Here's a quick way to make a buck. There's a huge return. If there's a huge return, there's a very good chance you're rescuing something, and it may or may not be their asset. So I don't know. We're not like naming names or anything, but this is something that we've seen over and over again, and it's disgusting, frankly. But there's a lot of deals right now that are happening without full disclosure.
Absolutely. All right. We did that slide, and I think we have 2 more slides to go.
Right. So we just talked to you about the state of the market and all these different, headwinds and tailwinds and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, you can just forget about all this. All you need to do is just find your unfair advantage, your asymmetric advantage. We need to trademark that or something like that. It trumps market conditions. So whatever's going on in your neck of the woods, could be totally different than what's happening in the national market. Your local interest rates vary. We get way lower interest rates in Tacoma than we do in Minnesota because there's just more capital in Tacoma, and just interest rates are lower in Tacoma than they are in Minnesota. Maybe that sounds crazy to y'all, but that's how it works. And interest rates are higher in Texas than they are in Minnesota. Like there's like a 2-point spread between the rate you can get in Tacoma and the rate you can get in Texas. It's wild how different that is. The riches are in the niches. We found a couple really, really lucrative niches that we just double and triple down on. Just find your niche and lean into it. Don't get bored with what works. Fortunes are made by fixing market inefficiencies, and real estate is an extremely inefficient market. So just find an area where there's a big gap between supply and demand, between the buyer and the seller. That's where your fortune is made. Elaine talked about opportunity cost is your greatest cost. Who will you be 10 years from now? How much money could you make over the next 10 years? Who cares about what's going to happen this next year? You have to go build something this year if you want to build something amazing 10 years from now. So think about that. Solve a hard problem. Add massive value. Take immediate action. Like, don't get paralyzed in all these charts and graphs. Just go create massive value for people, and you will be extraordinarily successful. And you're going to have a blast doing it. So if you somehow just kind of glazed over in all the state of the market, which we've had really good retention through this whole thing. So apparently people are getting a lot of value out of it. But if you're struggling to have a takeaway here, like Burr is hard, or now's a good time to sell single family homes, like just walk away with this slide. Just as soon as you're done here, go take massive action on the one thing that's going to move the needle for you in your life, financially, personally, whatever, and just go do it right now, and you're going to be extraordinarily successful. And who cares about any of this nonsense? If you double the value of an asset, it does not matter if that asset goes up or down in 20% in value. I mean, that's really the core of our business models. We had such insane value that we can buy all the time and do well. We do try to keep an eye on the market because it does have a big impact. It allows us to create even more value. But like, you can be extraordinarily successful if you just find a niche and you create massive value. That's my hard close for y'all.
I love it. I love it. It is spring. Go out and plant some seeds and get on some tractors.
Vicky says my unfair advantage is Black Swan. Well, thank you, Vicky. I appreciate you saying that.
Sweet. That is a wrap for us, you guys. I have a couple little dates and stuff here. If you have any last questions, pop those into chat and we'll get those before we close. Our next live time together, we actually are going to have what we're calling like a little lunch and learn right after the Fed meeting. So that'll be just a brief kind of pop-up thing that we'll have mid next week after the Fed meeting. But our next formal time is October 4th at noon Central is our Q3 performance webinar. And then coming up in November on the 19th and the 21st is our 2-part visioning workshop series at 7 p.m. Central. All of this is at blackswancalendar.com that just automatically syncs with your Google Calendar, iCalendar. So all of that's there. Very excited about those things coming up. And then, of course, Fund 4 is still open, blackswanfund4.com. Nick's been having a lot of calls with investors and stuff over the last week or so. We are in a big final push for our raise because we're closing on Boulder Ridge, which is the final large asset that's going into Fund 4. Very excited about that asset. We have our site manager who will manage that office. He's been here in Rochester with us for probably about 2 months now, maybe 2.5. And he's handling the Georgetown transition right here, like with our local staff, our leadership staff, all of those things, so that when he takes over Boulder Ridge, he's ready to go. And we're just so excited about, you kind of hear about how we did Stonehaven Apartments, right? Like we planned for a long time beforehand and then strike. So we're planning with his training and everything, and very excited about that upcoming closing. So blackswanfund4.com. And I'll check here. Okay, I didn't see any additional questions come in. Of course, you can ask questions in Real Estate at Scale, send us an email, whatever it is, we're here to serve you. And otherwise, we will see you guys October 4th for our Q3 performance webinar. Q2 was arguably like the best quarter in the whole history of the company. We talked about rent growth and operations and efficiencies and those sorts of things. Q3 is just carrying the momentum of Q2. We're very excited about the RDS refi, and after that refi, we'll be able to plan our distributions for Fund 1 and Fund 2. So just a lot of things are kind of coming together here at the latter half of 2024. It's been a good year. So. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Have a good night. Get some rest, and we'll get the replay out as soon as possible. Good night, everyone.